May I have your attention for a very important public service announcement? We are taking over the internet, and the United States champion of word wrestling entertainment has returned for a very special edition of the Pocket Locker podcast. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, folks, I am in airplane mode. And tonight, I have a very, very, very special guest with me, the one and only internet trailblazer herself, the Nazi punching extraordinaire, the lovely, lovely Tsumami. How are you doing?
Hello.
Good to see you. We're excited to see you. It's good to see you on camera, on the channel, in front of the gang. Wave to the gang. Who's in the chat so far? Ryan is here. Dave is here. AR is here. Look at the trees is here. Pragmatic Crystal is here. Paired channels. Who's paired channel? Are you paired on your channel, Tsumami?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Hi to the Tsumami people. Yeah, subscribe. That's awesome. All right, you ready to get into this video? So Tsumami wanted to join me all to talk about this video, how to radicalize a normie. And I think there's a lot to get into, so we should probably get into it.
Yeah, let's play it.
All right. Here we go.
He likes video games, sci-fi. Say for the sake of argument, your friend Gabe is starting to worry you. Gabe's always been just, a regular guy, not very political. He likes video games, sci-fi, comics, Star Wars, and anime. White guy shit. The only offbeat thing about him is you suspect there's like a 20% chance he's a furry. For all intents and purposes, Gabe is a normie. But recently, Gabe's been...
All right, so I just want to say, for those of y'all that are not routinely and gathered, that the other day we had a tremendous exploration of furrydom, trying to figure out.
It was for science.
It was for science. Trying to understand the sexuality of furries. Do they do it in the suits? How do they do it in? Actually, Tsumami, you cracked the puzzle about that they do it in the suits. Oh my god!
Yeah, that primarily the majority of furries do not prefer to have sex in the suits, but fursuit sex is a whole thing in itself, and it's like a very particular thing. Like, it is basically rubbing the.
So if you have a furry friend that would like to come explain it on the internet, that would like to come tell us how they do or don't do it in the suits. You just don't know the things, gang. A lot of educational stuff happens together. You gotta be there.
I learned
man.
the term strategically placed holes the other day.
Strategically placed holes. There we go.
Spending a lot of time on some radically conservative forums and listening to radically conservative podcasts and picking some radically conservative arguments with you and your friends. You never would have expected this, not from Gabe. And given the speed it's happened, it's worrying to think where it might be headed. How have the alt-right gotten their hooks into your friend? If you've ever known a Gabe, this video's for you. Here's how to radicalize a normie. Step 1, identify the audience. What you need to know before we begin is around 2013, the Nazis went online. Hate groups in the US, as tracked by the Southern Poverty Law Center, had been growing in number since the Knots, but between 2012 and 2014, they dropped by almost a quarter. Patriot groups dropped by over a third. However, hate crimes stayed about the same. Radical conservatism was not shrinking, but decentralizing. Still radical and still often violent, but now full of white nationalist nomads unlikely to join a formal organization. This didn't make them harmless. What it did was protect their asses from the typical hate group cycle of getting the public's attention, making allies in conservative media, swelling their numbers, and then eventually disgracing themselves with failures in fighting and, often enough, members committing horrific acts of violence, which come with social and sometimes legal consequences for all the other members. So the alt-right and their fellow travelers these days don't so much have members. They have hashtags, followers, viewers, and subscribers. This insulates them from their own audience. If Gabe, as a member of that audience, were to go out and commit a crime on their behalf, there'd be little doubt they had a hand in radicalizing him, but it'd be very hard to claim they told him to do it. On some of these sites where Gabe spends hours and hours of his day, he's never created an account or left a comment. The people radicalizing him don't even know he's there. This distributed nature is what makes the alt-right and the movements connected to it unique. You may remember a notable proof of concept for this strategy. Doing almost everything online has, as compared with traditional hate movements, dramatically increased their reach and inoculated them from consequence. The trade-off is a lack of control. And so we come to Gabe.
All right, so before we come to Gabe, I was just thinking, part of what I've been struggling with lately, Tsumami, is that we're like a right-wing associated space. It's a hard bitter pill to swallow, right? But in the vein of it's weird to still be, debating flat earth and debating creationist, and even though I feel like we've clearly built the community, in heavy air quotes, around people who are clearly the opposed side on so many of these things, it's still nevertheless the space where those people go. And you're there in the spaces where their participation is normalized, even if you're there even if you're hate watching, you're watching type deal.
Because we've basically allowed them to hijack our spaces. This is why, that's why I feel like platforming certain people and certain topics is problematic.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's a problem. Like I said, because even if you're all right, so there's definitely a continuum of platforming, right? Like promoting somebody or being buddy with somebody is definitely different than debating them, which is different still than having a conversation, right? But or like we talk about doing a takedown video that's you're not engaged. These things are different meaningfully, right? But even in the case of say something like doing a takedown video about somebody, which is both openly antagonistic, so you're not supporting their ideas, and they're not there, so you're not putting them on your channel or whatever, you are still platforming their ideas, right? Even if to talk about the thing that's dumb or whatever.
Yeah, I think it allows people to maintain a level of control, and they when you have a real-time debate or conversation, that person can then basically just kind of fucking run roughshod and fucking spew out whatever bullshit they want, whether it's hate speech or whether they are veiling it behind very carefully chosen words. It does give you a measure of control. You can mute them, you can do shit like that, but I do think that, I do still think that even giving it airtime, that is platforming it to a degree. That is giving it life to a degree.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about. And yeah, so I don't know, there's a lot of us that are I think committed to doing the good work of combating bad ideas on the internet and all that type of shit. And I just think there needs to be more of it acknowledged that we are still part of the problem in that way, even if you have the best of intentions. And like I said, it's been a hard pill to swallow just because I love this shit sometimes, and I love the people I've met out here. But yeah, it's not all good. All right, let's keep rolling. We're gonna get through this, gang.
Gabe exists at the intersection of the kinds of people the alt-right is looking for: straight white cis men who feel emasculated by modern society, primarily, though they do make exceptions, and the kinds of people who are
no, Mike. I'm not suggesting that that when people say silent about the anti-science, I honestly don't know. Like, to be real with you, like, I don't know. I've been largely on the campaign amongst my scientific colleagues that staying silent is not the solution, and like definitely it isn't effective. At the same time, engaging effectively is also incredibly difficult. So just being as candid as possible. I don't know. Tsumami, do you have thoughts on that question? Do you just want us to stay silent about the anti-science?
That you just outright ignore anything, and actually, it really irritates me when people do that. Well, should we just ignore everything then? I don't know. Sometimes people may feel a little personally, may feel that a certain statement is maybe directed towards them personally. It's not. It's generally for everybody within the larger atheist, scientific, whatever sphere, community, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But aside from that, yeah, the whole like should we just ignore it? Do you think that the flat earth movement is like a mainstream movement that's really like, we really have a threat of like this becoming like taught in schools? No, it's not. And it's fucking ludicrous to entertain these motherfuckers. Something like creationism that, yeah, for the last fucking 30 years, we've had to battle these people in court to try to keep this shit out of schools and being taught to children. I think, yeah, there's you have to pick and choose like what is and what isn't worth fucking like putting your time into. And
so if Mike Johnson was so if Mike Johnson was a flat earther, things might be different.
I wouldn't even say that. Like, he is the Speaker of the House, and he does have a lot of power in this country. But I don't think he's the Speaker of the House because of his evangelical like ideas. Like, oh, my connection is unstable. I keep getting a little connection is unstable pop up. Like,
oh, you're fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Everything's good on stream, I think. All right.
I mean, if that was what he was like running off of, that's what he's constantly talking about, yeah, that would be a problem. But I feel like that creationism, that is like the issue. There's certain other things that I don't understand why the fuck we're entertaining these things or having debates or discussions. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of what we're here to talk about. I think to some extent, although I guess we're gonna be going through this video, but yeah, I think that's the question is the fact that it's probably not going to be like an automatic thing. It's going to depend on a lot of variables, and I think it's important that we just start to have more of a conversation about what those variables are. Like, to me, they're definitely what is the particular topic, how relevant or mainstream is the particular topic, who's engaging, like who are they engaging
how
with,
potentially damaging it could be to a certain group, or
like how damaging it could be to particular groups. Like, is the person that's engaging, like, do they have background, or are is that a good area for them or whatever? So yeah, there's a lot. All right, yeah, let's get some more footage in.
Vulnerable to recruitment. Gabe fits the first profile in that he got bullied in high school and often feels he has to hide his nerdy side for fear of getting ridiculed. The alt-right also has success with men who can't get laid, or recently got divorced, or feel anxious about an influx of non-white people in their community. These things can make one feel like less than the confident white man they are supposed to be. And it's the closest they will ever come to being minoritized. Regarding the second profile, it's important to know that Gabe is not categorically different from you or me. He's a cishet white dude. His problems are not unique. There's not a ton of research into the demography of the alt-right, but there may be a higher than average chance Gabe has a history of being abused or comes from a broken home. You don't know if that's true of Gabe, he's never said. But most abuse survivors don't become Nazis. The things that make people like Gabe recruitable tend to be situational. It happens often during periods of transition, as dramatic as the death of a loved one, or as benign as moving to a new city. Things that make people ask big life questions. Gabe has concerns like economic precarity, not knowing his place in a changing world, stressful working conditions. In other words, Gabe is suffering under late capitalism, same as everyone, and it's entirely plausible he could have gone down the path to becoming a leftist. Now, this is not to make an economic anxiety argument. The animating force...
All right, this is interesting, though, because I do think that it's interesting, at least to me, that there's a lot of problematic personalities that emerge from this type of like normie, and it's like the same like because he could have become like a neolib, right? And a lot of times this type of person also becomes a dumbass enlightened centrist. Sorry to the enlightened centrists out there. Right? But and they all kind of have problematic things. So I think it's just interesting to think that like we focus like so much on the person who becomes victim to the alt-right. But I think for me, it's obvious that like there's a way in which I also want to talk about how this whole thing, it manifests in like a spectrum of problematic people, not who don't all become weaponized right wingers, right? Like some of them just become other people in problematic places dealing with these same situations. Yeah, like just a quick example for me is I work with a lot of people who like they feel some type of way, and a lot of it does boil down to like not knowing where they fit in things, and like having to change their language and like having to change their words, and like feeling that like their maleness and their whiteness are being talked about in ways that are like negative for the first time in their life. And sometimes I find myself surprised who these people are. I'm learning that I like shouldn't be, but I think it's probably fair to say many people in our audience would be surprised who these people are too. Like it's not always obvious.
I feel like over the last 8 years, since like I don't want to say 2016 specifically, but like I think a lot less people are shocked because I think there are a lot more. This is basically what it is: how to radicalize a normie. I think there are a lot more people that are like this now over the last like decade than there were before, and I don't think there's that many people that are surprised because I think everybody does know a fucking Gabe. Everybody knows a Gabe. Everybody knows there's at least one. It's usually going to be a white guy. It's not always a white guy, but it's usually going to be a cis heterosexual white guy in their life that, yeah, they may not necessarily even vote right wing, depending on where they live. Like it may not be in America. They may not be voting for Trump. They could be voting for another right wing politician in their own country, but they may not even be doing that. They may be still voting fairly liberal, but in their friend groups and their jobs and like places like that, it'll still that shit will still come out. I have a friend that I play Fortnite with that every once in a while he says some shit that I'm just like, the fuck did you just say? Like, excuse me? He absolutely gets, checked very quickly, but like there's only so much, like I don't know how many other people like me are in his life. There's only so much you can do like when somebody has become radicalized like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I think that's
There's
part of it
everybody knows
too.
one.
That's part of it too, is we don't discuss how segregated our lives have become. And so a lot of times you are dealing with somebody that doesn't have a lot of diversity in their life, right? And yeah, I think that's one of the things that I picked up on this with not just this video, but a lot of videos, is there's a way in which we still talk about online culture as though it's abnormal. And not only does it is it in a way that kind of like it does this kind of like, oh, there's like normal people and then there's all you like weird terminally online thing. And it misses like how many people are engaged in like meaningful ways online. And then it also misses how much online culture influences the culture, how much that like is culture now. So yeah, I don't know. Those
No,
are
it's
my
very because
thoughts.
it's a very recent thing. I feel like,
That's true.
especially over the last 4 years since
That's
the
true.
pandemic, everybody's online now. Like,
That's true. That's true. It's like we're still people are still adjusting to the fact that that's the new normal.
I definitely used to make fun of people that would use Tinder and online dating, and damn sure that I have multiple apps on my phone now. Like,
There's a lot of us in that boat. That's a great confession. All right, here we go.
Of the far right is and always has been bigotry. But the alt-right targets Gabe by treating his economic anxiety as one of many things bigotry can be sold as a solution to. It is their aim that when dissatisfied white men go looking for answers, they find the alt-right before they find us. Step 2. Establish a community. Were Gabe pledging an old-school hate movement, there would probably be a recruiter to usher him into an existing community. But that's the kind of formalized interaction modern extremists tend to avoid. Online extremism has many points of entry and everybody's journey is unique, so rather than be comprehensive, we will focus on what are, in my estimation, the two most common pathways. The far right creates a community Gabe is likely to stumble into, or infiltrates a community Gabe is already in. The stumble upon method has two main branches, one of which is just Gabe ends up on a Chan board, which we've already done a video about. The other is kind of the polar opposite of 4chan's cult of anonymity. Gabe ends up in the fandom of a far-right thought leader. These folks are charismatic media personalities. That's charismatic according to Gabe's tastes, not ours. I don't understand it either. And these personalities may gain traction on any number of platforms, from podcasts to reportage to blogging, though the most effective platform for red pilling is, and yes, I am biting the hand that feeds me, YouTube. They may get Gabe's.
All right, so this is where I think some interesting connections come in with even like our spaces. All right, so one of the things that we talked a little bit about Tsumami is like I'm kind of like a I don't know what the word is. I was thinking of a derogatory word, but I'm probably gonna use the wrong one. But I'm one of those weird like Americana bros in the sense that like I like sports balls and especially like combat sports and wrestling and MMA and boxing, right? And all of these spaces now have a weird way in which they're right leaning, right? And in a sense they like have been, because they've always like appealed to like a certain demographic, but now it's weird. It's to the point where like, you know, you go to a UFC event and like Trump shows up with Dana White and Kid Rock and like everyone in the arena's going crazy, and you're just like, how much do I really want to watch this fight? Like it's but I mentioned that to say then that so quickly gets you to the Joe Rogans of the world, right? And then you're in the right wing mana blogosphere, like like before you even realized it. You're like one UFC
The
event
slippery
and a
slope.
podcast away from Steven Crowder, right? Like,
I definitely feel like there are certain things that like you're more likely to, go down that slippery slope. So like wrestling is combat sports. That's definitely one of the things. Hunting, combat sports.
yes.
I feel like there's definitely certain
Toxic masculinity, AR said. Yes, these are the things where toxic masculinity is like celebrated and like normalized and for sure. The thing I think is interesting is that like it's very clear that like the sort of podcasting right winger space and the like apologetic-y podcasting space are like very closely aligned, and they share an aesthetic and like certain ideas and things. And so I think it is easy for somebody to like get into the right wing stuff and pretty quickly end up into the Christo-fascism type of shit. Because again, you'll have like a Jordan Peterson come in, right? Who we think of as like right-wing apologist asshole, but like he gets them into like the how to be a independent man and clean your room and take responsibility nonsense.
yeah. Sorry.
We're getting
Butters is out of control over here.
Butters wants to be on the show. Butters is like, something is taking away her attention. I don't like it. I'm gonna rub my butt on it. Like that's how we're gonna solve this problem.
Attention through fairly conventional means, like talking about or even generating controversy to get themselves trending. While some of the more committed will employ dubious SEO tactics like clickbait, Google bombing, and data voids. But what they tend to have in common, especially the most accessible ones, is that they don't present themselves as entry points to the radical right. In fact, many did not set out to be far-right thought leaders and may not think of themselves as such, though they are often selling products of which the alt-right are among their biggest purchasers, and it's not like they're turning the money away. So there's that. How they present is the same way anyone presents who wants to be successful on social media. Accessible, approachable, authentic. The face-to-face relationship a budding extremist forms with their recruiter or the leader of their hate group's local chapter are here folded into one parasocial relationship with a complete stranger. Why this person appeals to Gabe is they're not selling politics as politics, but conservatism as a kind of lifestyle brand. They rely heavily on critiquing or ridiculing the left. Feminists are oversensitive, black people unintelligent, queer folks doomed to loneliness, and trans people insane. Now, I don't know if it's a coincidence that these are all things Gabe thinks about himself in his low moments. By contrast, they don't.
I was also exactly like, this is very much also where Christianity has turned itself to, and it's gone the same way, right? It's no longer like the fire and brimstone, like radical shout down, like corner preachers. It's like your friendly coworker who just like wants to bring you to their church, that's like super focused on loving the community and really honestly doesn't have a denomination. They might like low key have a denomination, but like they're very much have what I would consider, like, I call it like corporate Christianity. There's like, they're part of like a network of churches that share a mission, and like you'd have to do some digging to figure out what denomination it's affiliated with. And it's very much the same thing. There's just like a very charismatic stuff. They avoid sensitive topics, and yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
I do think that there's just as many that are very out in the open with their fire and brimstone shit, though. If anything, I feel like we have come back to the fire and brimstone shit. Like, I feel like that had fucking become more underground of a topic over the last, like, I don't know, however many fucking decades. And I feel like now we're coming back to the fire and brimstone. I don't feel like I had seen, granted, like I'm not actively looking up preachers or shit like that, but I feel like I hadn't seen these people that are literally like, that's exactly what they're spewing, is fire and brimstone shit. Like, you're like, everything is about hell and eternal damnation and blah 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 blah, and you're sinful for not for having sex even, but just for wearing a pair of like short shorts or some shit. Like, oh my god, like, there, I feel like if anything, we've come all the way back to the 1600s. We're right back to the puritanical purity culture, fucking, you're gonna burn and die in hell and blah blah blah. Like, that's, and like that does work for a lot of people, because they're, all you need is that little spark, putting that thought into somebody's head as a child that if they are bad, they're going to go to hell. And like, that's forever going to haunt them. There's so many people that, like, I know it's the fear of hell that keeps them sucked in. It ain't the community, it ain't their family, it's the fear of hell for a lot of people.
So what I think is interesting is there's definitely also a lot of infighting between those type of churches. Like, I think the ones that are more out in front with their sort of, you know, antagonistic type of approach to things, like, you know, don't think the other ones are doing it right, and I think they sometimes envy them for you know, their friendliness and all that. But to your point, I think a lot of those other churches, they also are doing their own thing. Like, no, we're not, like, we're not doing Christianity the easy way. So they might suck you in with some nice shit, but then once you're in there, you'll be surprised. Like, oh, wait, I think most of y'all are Trump supporters, or like weirdly all about the anti-woke. Like, it comes out of them, right? When you get to their thing, because to your point, they're probably themselves struggling to remain pure in that sort of weird conservative American biblical
Hellscape.
Jesus bullshit. Yeah. Yeah. Right, that's awesome. Let's keep hearing about the guys that get sucked into.
Sell conservatism as having sounder policies or a more coherent moral framework, but that abandoning progressive principles and embracing
Come for the potluck,
conservative
stay
ones
for the shame.
will
Katina,
make Gabe
that's fire.
happier. Remember, Gabe isn't looking for white nationalism or misogyny. What he wants is the cure to his soul sickness. And these friendly micro celebs are here to offer a shot of life advice with politics as the chaser. It is extremely important that politics be presented as a set of affects, not a set of beliefs. The second pathway is infiltration, which is its own beast. Media personalities sometimes become gateways to the right almost by accident. They do something edgy, a part of their audience reacts positively, and facing no real consequence, they do it more. This leads to further positive reinforcement from conservative fans, the rest of the audience acclimates, and the cycle repeats, the personality pushing the envelope further and further based on what flies with their increasingly conservative audience. In this way, they become a right-wing figure by both radicalizing and being radicalized by their audience. Infiltration is deliberate.
All right, this is also what got us going when we were thinking about this shit and Gather, because our space gets, like you said, our spaces get infiltrated by these people, and people don't realize that this type of infiltration is deliberate. And it often
dealing with right now.
Yes, like we're dealing with right now. Yes, and it often starts as one or two people, but is often more pronounced when it's one or two content creators who just realize, here's a new community of people to engage with, especially when those people are very excited to find people to engage with and debate and things like that. And it's a real problem. I have more thoughts, but there's a lot. Go ahead, Tsumami. I want to make sure you get your thoughts in there.
I don't really have anything to add right now.
All right. So one thing I want you to your thoughts on is just the fact that some people don't see it, because part of what happens in YouTube is, like, I don't know, like, a lot of people don't they don't participate in these spaces the same way that people like me and you do. So if you do something problematic on your stream and then you just kind of dip, you might not realize what the downstream consequences are because you're not paying attention to how what goes on in your channel like is part of what goes on other channels and in other spaces.
Yeah, I think that there's some people that, I mean, I don't want to say that's a negative thing, because if anything, I do think that I personally do feel like that's how you're supposed to run a YouTube channel. Is
Sure,
you're
yeah,
not supposed to form a parasocial
absolutely,
relationship with your community, and you need to keep a layer between yourself.
yes,
You really do.
yes, great
and people
point.
can get fucking weird, and like I think that's just common sense. But at a certain point, like when you have ingratiated yourself to basically what is an online community and you have become part of that community, you've now removed that line, and like you really can't just be running your channel in such a, I don't know, like lax, like not lax, but fucking like in that kind of way where like I'm just gonna live stream whatever I say is whatever I say, whoever I talk to is whoever I talk to, like it's my channel, doesn't matter what the fallout is, and like doesn't matter who else in my community or people that I may or may not have referred to as friends or been friendly with, what happens like in regards to them or what they think or whether they're affected by negative fucking shit that gets said it doesn't even have to be on the channel, it's like in your stream itself, it could be in your chat that you're not checking, like.
Yeah, that's why I try to make these distinctions, and they're not always clear. I'm not always doing a good job of it, but I try to make a distinction between, oh, like so-and-so is a content creator I watch versus even like a content creator versus that I know versus just somebody I consider to be like a friend or something, like I don't know, like Maya or Bree, like somebody that I actually interact with offline in my day-to-day life. And yeah, that's more why I talk about it. I know it sounds like I'm shitting on people. I know it comes off as like I'm crapping on other content creators. I'm not. I'm just thinking it's really important to notice that, and that way you adjust your expectations, because that's what I've had to do. I've had to be like, oh crap, part of the reason so-and-so keeps stepping in dog shit is because they're not around between streams to realize what the hell's going on when they're not live, so.
Will reliably target any community that has 1, a large white male population, 2, whose niche interests allow them to feel vaguely marginalized, and 3, who are not used to progressive critique of said interest. This isn't to say progressive critique doesn't exist or hasn't been baked into the property from the beginning, but that it has been so far easy for white guys to ignore. As such, progressives within that community probably don't talk politics much, and women and minorities are perfectly welcome to post, same as anyone, but just, don't make identity politics, like a thing. Given Gabe's proclivities, he's probably already in a number of fan communities where he can geek out and not get teased. And this is where the far right will go looking for him. Communities are at their most vulnerable to infiltration at times of political discord. This can happen naturally, say a new property in the fandom has a black protagonist, or it can be provoked, say a bunch of channers join the forum and say provocative things about race to get people arguing, or both. Left to its own devices, the community might sort out its differences and maybe even come out more progressive than they started. But with the right pressure applied in the right moment, these communities can devolve into arguments about the need to remove a nebulously defined politics from the conversation. The adage about bros on the internet is political means anything I disagree with.
And this is a thing that I think is part of the problem too, because from my perspective, like there's a lot of people in these spaces who want to talk about things like philosophy, or they want to talk about science, or they want to talk about atheism and religion or whatever, and they do ostensibly want to avoid talking about quote unquote politics. And they think that first of all, that's just something you say that's like become very coded, like a coded like white guy thing to say like, I want this to be a neutral space where everybody feels comfortable, so we avoid quote unquote divisive topics. But they don't realize all of those things get coded in a very particular way that actually has significant political and social implications. And on top of that, by the very nature of the topics you want to discuss and who you want to discuss them with, you're in the thick of it. Because when you, again, want to talk to creationists and flat earthers and religious apologists and people who want to debate objective versus subjective morality, you're going to be talking to right-wing Christ a fascist. Like, and their engagement with you comes with an agenda.
Yeah, I think more often than not, I want to keep this a neutral space and keep politics out of it is really just a fucking sanitized way of saying I want to be allowed to talk to whomever I want to be allowed, whomever I want to talk to, and if that includes motherfuckers that are goddamn Nazis, I don't want to get the flack that like basically is really deserved. Like, I don't want to bring up any type of intersectional issue when in reality, like that's not something that can be helped. Like some things that's just going to come with the territory. But I think it's very self-serving, and it's very much not motivated by, I don't think that it is well intended. I think a lot of people want to see it as like this is well intended and that somebody is trying to keep things neutral, but in reality, like you're not keeping it neutral when you're talking to somebody that literally espouses fucking Nazi doctrines. That's not keeping it neutral. You are opening the door to somebody that absolutely makes your space not just problematic, but it's now like it's not a safe space. And people, whatever stupid little far right idiot, oh God, you need a safe space. No, bitch, it's called people that have been targeted and marginalized. I'm now starting to dislike the word marginalized because it's so easy to just throw out. People that have been targeted and fucking like killed and fucking oppressed and fucking treated like goddamn shit for fucking centuries. Certain groups, yes, they need a goddamn space where they can fucking convene and not have to fucking be infiltrated by fucking literal Nazis.
Right.
And it's crazy that we even need to have the conversation. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy that the conversation even needs to be had. Like, but that is how much of a bubble a lot of cisgender, heterosexual white people, and that's not just men, that's white women I have more of a problem with personally. But
yeah, it's tough.
You've never experienced certain things, so you don't understand why a safe space is needed, why a barrier is needed. Like,
yeah, and that's kind of what I meant too about like the very fact that they want to engage with certain people in this space means that they're actually seem more concerned with creating a safe space for them. And then that's the problem, right? You can't create a safe space for Nazis and the people they would throw in the ovens. Like that's not going to work, right? And if you're there to have the conversation with the Nazi, then I'd say, but then that ends up being where the priorities go, right? And that's what leads to the thing where when you speak up in a space like this, like you get more backlash for speaking up than the person does for spewing some bigoted nonsense to begin with.
Yeah, that's something that makes me sick, regardless of whether it's personally happened to me or not. I don't know how many times I've seen it happen where you guys hold a space for conversation. You allow somebody that you know damn well has very fucked up views and is a very sick person into that space to converse. And then usually after an extended period of time of them being allowed to fucking rail out their fucking shit, which I'm sorry, isn't this supposed to be a neutral, politic-free space? No, it's definitely not, because you guys, you allow them to sit and like spew out their shit the whole time, and the second that somebody that's often from a marginalized group pushes back, oh, you're the one that's causing problems, you're the one that's being rude, you're the one that's being too loud, you're the one that's being saying things that we don't want to be said. That's not proper decorum in this space. You know what's not proper decorum is I don't know, being allowed to like spew out like hateful fucking like shit like
Right.
left and fucking right.
Right.
Whether that be a Jim Bob or whether that be a Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right.
Why was the problem not there when that person was allowed to go on for hours, months, whatever the situation is with their bullshit? But the second that somebody finally says, you know what, blah, 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 back to this person, and counters them with just the tiniest little fraction of the same kind of energy, then it's, oh, you're the one that's causing the problem.
Yeah, that's the part of what's been like really difficult for me, is that I feel like there's no way people don't notice these things, and
The hypocrisy
like,
of it.
yeah, or like for me, just to boil it down, like a lot of these things, like they overlap with racist. Like when if you're talking to me, like any of these people that we debate with, honestly, like I don't care what it is. It could be a philosophical debate, it could be a social debate, it could be a religious debate, like a science debate. The other side is always a side I associate with racism. I associate with misogyny. I associate with some sort of super problematic bigotry. Like I was watching a video earlier today from a creationist, and I was like, part of what you start to have to do is not just focus on where the person's wrong about science, but how they're using their anti-science as a wedge for a much larger, more problematic agenda. And what it feels like with so many people who don't have any sort of, marginalized identity, for lack of a better way to put it, they don't recognize that. Like, to them, the problem is the philosophical argument. The problem is the and it's like, no, that's the fucking bait. Like, that's the bone they throw out. Like, these are, like, I don't know. It's like I see Nazis coming. Like I see these people coming a mile away, and it feels like that's a huge part of the problem. Is like, how do you not know?
Because they have the privilege to not see that. Because they have the privilege to not see that.
Yeah, that's the issue.
To be like, to develop a radar to fucking like spot these people from a mile away, so they don't have that radar. And honestly, a lot of people of color, I feel like, especially mixed race people, a lot of people of color don't develop that either. If they are othered, if they are treated like, well, you're not like the others, it's hard to fucking like, honestly, to grasp like the nuances of like how everything is racial. Like, I feel like a lot of the time people on the right or people in the middle that are doing that, you're the one that's causing a problem and being too reactive thing. They don't God, I forgot I was gonna go with that. I got just like distracted myself.
We were just watching this FD Signifier.
Something in the background.
We were just watching this FD Signifier video, and one of the good points that I think he brought up was that there are a lot of groups that benefit from some sort of affiliation or association with patriarchy, capitalism, whatever it might be. And so there's a lot of buy-in, even if you shouldn't. So there's a lot of women who buy into patriarchal nonsense, even though they shouldn't, because, hey, if it's that puts them on top if they think they're, positioned in the right way. So just to say that you know, having one of these identities doesn't necessarily mean you're not problematic yourself. Like, I could say this as like as a black man, right? There's a lot of black men who like get beat down by the white dominated patriarchy out in the world and then bring it home, right? Or black people who are educated have a certain degree of looking down on other black people, right? And so you'll recapitulate that same oppression sometimes, and it's something that, you know, I'm trying to constantly be on guard about, but it definitely happens. So yeah, so I think so I think a lot of people ignore it. I think a lot of people, they just ignore it. All right, let's roll some more tape. Political means anything I disagree with.
But it would be more accurate
much
to say here, political means anything on which the community disagrees. For instance, Nazis are bad is an apolitical statement because everyone in the community agrees. It's common sense and therefore neutral. But paradoxically, Nazis are good is also apolitical. Because Nazis are bad is the consensus, Nazis are good must just be an edgy joke. And even if not, the community already believes the opposite, so the statement is harmless, tolerable. However, feminism is good is a political statement because the community hasn't reached a consensus. It is debatable and therefore political, and you should stop talking about it. And making political arguments, no matter how rational, is having an agenda, and having an agenda is ruining the community. Now, it is curious how the things that provoke the most
pause that
disagreement...
shit. This is where a lot of this comes in, right? Because like a lot of how the right wing is so effective is by doing this and by having their sort of, you know, cis het white Christianness be the normal, be the default. Anytime you're something else, that's therefore an agenda, that's political, and then that's how that shit gets coded as divisiveness. But you have to remember, when people are on the other side of that, it's just personal. And this is actually why the identity politics are so effective. Me advocating for Black people is just advocating for myself, is advocating for people like me, is advocating for our autonomy, is advocating for our struggle. It's anything but political. And the reality is you have to get through, you know, trying to just get Black people some modicum of equality up in this bitch, and then we can talk about our political differences, right? But you know, this is just how bigots win, right? Like by making the identity of people they hate political issues, and then people don't understand that the people who are standing up for those things are doing so for their fucking survival, not for their political agenda.
We're seeing that very much, like right now with the, I don't know how many times y'all have heard the trans agenda, including out of probably people's mouths that you would not expect it to come out of, that
Right.
phrase, the trans agenda. Oh, you mean literally just like wanting to like be left the fuck alone and like to live? That's an agenda now, I guess. Trans people have an agenda because they want to live. Like, yeah, that's absolutely what it is fucking making it into a political thing. Like, it wasn't a political thing until you made it into a political thing. Like,
right. Yes, that's exactly what happens. So goddamn
it's
frustrating.
just people asking for a simple equality, and then like, yeah,
is ruining the community. Now, it is curious how the things that provoke the most disagreement tend to be whichever ones make white dudes uncomfortable. One of life's great unanswerable mysteries.
Oh, and by the way, I want to be clear that language is exactly the language used. And I want people to understand that. And I want to say, when we talk about this shit happens in our community, it happens to us. It's been said to me multiple times. I know it's been said to people like Steph multiple times. It's probably been said to people like Tsumami. People say, I'm with you on this, but you are ruining the community. They will actually use that very specific language. And it's just like, wow, yikes, big yikes. But I want people to be aware, like, we're not exaggerating. That shit literally happens, like, to the T.
Gather where this is going. A community that doesn't tolerate progressivism, but does tolerate Nazism, is going to start collecting Nazis. Nazis
Boom.
whose goal
There
is
you
to
go.
drive a wedge between the community and the left. Once the left acknowledges, hey, your community's developing a Nazi problem, the Nazis, who are, remember, trusted apolitical members of the community who might just be kidding about all the Nazi shit, say,
Ours
you hear
is.
that, guys? Those cultural Marxists just called all of us Nazis. Wedge. Similarly, any community members who say, but Nazis, though, are framed as infiltrators pushing an agenda, even if they've been there longer than the Nazis have. They get the wedge, too. This is how fandoms radicalize.
And that's what happens when the allies speak up. I've seen this, again, I don't want to mention names because they ain't here, but like I've seen this happen to people who have been out here, and y'all have some people have known out here for like the better part of a fucking decade. And they'll call out some bullshit, and then people will all of a sudden treat them like they've got some kind of crazy fucking radical agenda, and they'll be told again, ... you're ruining the community. Motherfucker, what? Like, what? What? Like, I'm talking about people that's like, what? I helped build this community. Oh man, people, most of us know. You better put some respect on that name. But it's crazy. It's crazy.
Are built as, yeah, I'll say it, safe spaces for nerds, weebs, and furries, and are told that the left is a threat to their safety. And given a choice between leaving a community that has mattered to him for years and simply adjusting to the community's shifting politics, the assumption is that Gabe will stay. This assumption is right often enough that a lot of fandoms have been colonized. What is true of both these methods, Gabe finding the right or the right finding him, is that Gabe does not come nor stay for the ideology. He's here for the community, the sense of being with his people, of having his fears validated and his enjoyment shared. The ideology is simply the price of admission. Step 3. Isolate.
Damn, and that's crazy too, because this is becoming everywhere. Like, it feels like you can't get away from this. Either that or I'm just a terrible person, y'all. But I feel because I'm feeling like in my professional life, there's a subtle subtext of all of this going on, right? I work at a university. Universities are very much talking about DEI and all of this type of stuff. I try to focus on that work, but I'm also, the let's just say a rare scholar with my identity. And it becomes this like politically charged thing at times. And you're like, wow, like this is you would think a very like, again, safe space. Like, we're advocating for students, we're advocating for good stuff that the university says it's on board with. Why are people, when it actually comes to it, treating us like we have some sort of crazy agenda? It's really weird. But then even like I think about gaming, right? And like how many gaming spaces, like I think about like sports gaming, I think about like first person shooters and battle royales, and I play GTA, like racing games. Like, I cannot think of a gaming space where this isn't having to be negotiated by people. Either, oh, I just deal with the toxicity, it's the price of, wanting to play this game, or I don't, you have games you play where you don't turn the chat on, or, like
Even in a game like, sorry, like
no, good. No, you're perfectly good. Go ahead.
Even in a game like, there's this game called Palia, where it is the entire brand of the game is supposed to be presented as a super inclusive, super friendly. This is a community-based game. It is a fucking massive multiplayer online community simulator. That's literally what it is a community simulator. There are fucking pop-ups every loading screen like, this is an inclusive community, remember to like be friendly to everybody and blah blah blah. Even in that fucking game, I still see I would still see, I haven't played it in several months, I would still see shit in the chat. I would still see, they give you the option for, regardless of what gender you are or how you identify, you have the ability to make your character look however you fucking want. You can put whatever you want on a male character, whatever you want on a female character. You can, and of course, what a shock that despite how inclusive this community is, even with the chat off, there are people that have reported like being harassed like by like a group of other motherfuckers in the game, a whole group of them.
Damn.
Because they had like a dress on like a male character or fucking like shit like that. It's like, holy shit, dude. Like, we're not playing like a round of Call of Duty. We're not playing a round of Fortnite or something where I'm a little more primed to expect bullshit, you know?
Right.
In the space. Even in a fucking game like that, there's still like, wow, really? Like, y'all are really like, I guarantee if you pulled up those people, if you could somehow manage to find their social media and shit like that, it would be filled with fucking right-wing, fucking transphobic fucking bullshit. I guarantee misogynistic, transphobic bullshit that would be all over their fucking social media.
I think that's like part of it for them. I think finding these spaces and like colonizing them. Yeah, it's like the infiltration. It's like colonizing them, making them spaces where their ideas are safe, right? Like that's actually, you know, they're planting their flag there. It's so weird, but yeah, it feels like you can't get away from it anymore. It feels like if you go to a bar, right, you have to know like, where's this bar at? Like, what is it? What bar is this? Because even a bar, right? You're either gonna walk into the bar and it's gonna be like Whiteley, so good, I drink it nightly, right? And you're gonna know, like, oh fuck, I can't drink in this place. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
You have to know what type of music they play in the bar before you go there. The same thing with strip clubs. I need to know what kind of music do they play in the strip club, because that's going to tell me what clientele they have and whether I'm going to have to deal with MAGA hat wearing motherfuckers or not.
And then everything's different when you do, right? And this is part of what. Okay, so I'm trying to say we're trying to say stuff that I think is actually really difficult. So it's kind of tough for me. But one of the things I feel like is part of how this works is white allies who are like, this stuff is new to, and I mean that like genuinely, it's just new, like just you haven't been doing this that long. It feels like they don't realize how all of the white civility shit has always been coded bigotry. And so it feels like part of that then is they're forced or compelled to like play into it. Like they don't know how, like, it's like, oh, well, the guy, he seemed really nice and he seemed really friendly and he just seemed like he genuinely just, you know, wanted to talk about his faith or whatever. And we're sitting on the side going, they always sound that way. They always, they're all right, because we're like, they've always done that, because we right, because you know what, they always were wiping out the Native Americans and then putting civilization on top of it, right? They treat that, think about, that's how they thought, right? They literally thought like, we're gonna wipe out these people and then put civilization on top of it. They built their ivory towers with slave labor and then created institutions we couldn't go to. So they've always been like sitting around in suits, sipping tea, smoking fucking cigars, talking about the philosophy of the fucking...
Congratulating themselves on being the masters of the universe.
Exactly. Congratulating themselves on being the master of the universe and giving each other this really like hush-toned fucking, oh, if you disagree with me, well, let's have a formal debate about it. Da, 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 da. And we've always said like we've been dehumanized the whole time they do this. And now it's like, you're not listening to us when we tell you this is how it's always been. They're always going to show up asking for a fucking argument or a debate or telling you that they want to have a conversation about different ideas and shit like this. And we're going, nah, these are just fucking racist. Just kick these fucking bigots out of here. Like, this is crazy. What are we doing?
A conversation always, and somehow a conversation with those kind of guys always like somehow makes its way to like solving the problem of immigration or women seeking equal rights. Like, that's somehow the conversation is always going to go in that direction. It may not necessarily in like a public debate on YouTube, but like yeah, those are the types that like they will engage you in these initial, let's talk about philosophy, let's talk about religion, let's talk about gaming, let's talk about whatever it is. And then, like, you know, lo and behold, a few months later, don't be surprised if you guys are talking about how to eliminate, like, fucking a certain type of group. Like,
yeah.
Slippery slope.
No, Maya, I totally agree. Like, that's one of the things I've learned is like, that's why I say like new to this, like, because I think that's like it's a way of acknowledging like a person has the best of intentions. They've probably maybe even themselves recently made a lot of change. But yeah, this is our area of expertise. This is a game we've been playing a lot longer. And so, yeah, I think our frustration is just venting about how hard it is sometimes when you're just trying to get people to listen and like understand these things. But
I would never expect a white person to understand the experience of a person of color or anybody that has any percentage, or not, I don't want to say fuck ancestry, that presents in any type of way that is not white. I would never expect that because I don't think it's fucking possible. I don't think it's possible to understand the lived experience of anybody else, of any other group. That doesn't make sense. But what I do expect people to do is when you're informed that there's a problem, to try to possibly like just listen to people. Like, I don't expect anybody to even like go out and like do the work themselves to educate themselves. I'm not expecting that. I would never. No offense, white people. I would never expect you to go out and do the work yourself. All offense intended, actually. But yeah, what I do expect is like when somebody that you supposedly consider a friend comes to you and says, "Hey, this is problematic," and I'm gonna explain to you why this is problematic. I want them to at least listen and like actually fucking absorb that. Not just fucking like, I don't know, I'm good. Okay, I'll leave the stream running in the background and like continue like working on my like whatever and not actually pay attention and not actually give a shit and never change anything and go right back the next day and do another stream or have another conversation with like basically the Nazi again. But like just maybe listen a little bit, like just maybe listen, maybe try to like understand that, like do the tiniest bit of work to like try to understand why somebody might feel the way that they feel, and like maybe go back and even rewatch your stream or go back and like think about what you said in a conversation and why it made this, you know, whomever it is feel like this is a problem. Like,
yeah. Also, sometimes I think you got to trust your friends. Like, you know, like one of the things I've observed just in different spaces, not even out here, is just, and I remember having a conversation about this with regards to this whole situation, was like sometimes the numbers will lie to you, right? Part of what happens is if you're part of the majority and there's an issue, if you appeal to what everybody else thinks, you know, you might be appealing like mostly to people who don't understand, right? And so sometimes the person that made you aware of an issue or is talking about an issue, they may be the only one or one of very few people in your life that actually understands. And so you may have to listen to those one or few people over what feels like the crowd, because the crowd might not get it. And I think that is partially what happens on YouTube a lot of times is, quite frankly, there's a much larger group of people that sometimes the problematic stuff appeals to than the few like of your friends or whatever that might be like, hey, you know, you might want to think twice about this. And so sometimes you just have to listen to those people, what feels like disproportionately to their numbers. And I know that that's weird, but that's kind of that's something that most people who are serious about equity have come to understand. Yeah. All right, let's roll this.
There is a vast.
Yeah, Maya, like when you say you believe women, we're asking you to look into it. And also, no group is a monolith, but if all the people in the group are saying the same thing, there's something to it. Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing about all people. That's why I'm nervous about. I try not to be prescriptive, maybe to a fault. Like I'm learning that maybe that's a problem. The reason I say that is because I want to give somebody things to think about. I don't want to portray it as a monolith. I don't want to be like, oh, I speak for all of this group. I just want to be like, as a member of this group, I see this as a potential issue that you should consider, right? But at the same time, I'm also learning to respect myself more, and like my perspective is as valued as anybody else's, and so sometimes I'm having to learn that like my desired outcome for a situation isn't necessarily less valid than anybody else's. So that's just, I don't know, I think that's just something most people probably have to juggle with on some level.
I feel like the opposite. Sometimes I feel like I need to realize whatever I think is the right way is not necessarily actually the right way, and what other people are going to suggest is sometimes a better fucking idea, and I need to maybe be like, oh, okay, let me shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I would say this friend group has like helped me with that, because we have a lot of different personalities, and that's helped me grow a lot, because we do have a lot of shut it down type personalities in our group, but we also have
too much like
but we also have some serious diplomats, and yeah, for sure. Oh, sorry, I'm clicking the wrong places.
Interconnected network of far-right communities out there, and Gabe is at this point only on the periphery. In order to keep him in, they need to disrupt his relationships to other communities and become more and more his primary online social space. Having made this space hostile to the left, they now seek to break his connections to progressives elsewhere in his life. This is hard to do online. The whole appeal of moving radicalism to the internet is that your away from keyboard life doesn't have to change. You are crypto the moment you log off. Some thought leaders will encourage their audience to cut ties with family of origin, or DFU, but even then, they can't monitor whether the audience has actually done it in the way an in-person movement could. And so alienating Gabe from the left is less controlled, and consequently, maybe less total. How much Gabe isolates is up to him. But the vast majority of far-right media presumes an alienation from the left. Part of conservative bloggers and YouTubers making the left look pathetic is doing a lot of takedowns and responses. This is a constant repetition of the left's arguments for the purpose of mockery. And for Gabe, it starts to replace any engagement with progressive media directly.
Okay, now this is something we talked about yesterday on Hot Program, because we were watching a clip from Fox Soul, right, which should immediately raise red flags, right, because it was like the Fox's like black fucking channels, just the Coon Network, and they were having a conversation between the host, who was clearly a black Christian, and two women who were black atheists, and I said that like, even though on the surface they were having the conversation, what it was clearly really there to do was train the audience in how to not engage genuinely. And again, bitter pill to swallow, but a lot of us, I think, have to be more candid about how that's what's happening in these spaces. The debates we're having are not the genuine of exchange of ideas we'd like them to be. They're often just an opportunity for two sides to rehearse their spiel in front of a live audience, and the conversations end up being the same way. I'm not saying that's, again, I'm not saying nobody should ever do it. I'm just saying that I think at least for me, like, I've had to just be more honest with myself about the fact that, like, it's hard to get beyond that. It's hard to be effective in a space where that's happening. And even if you want to keep doing it, you shouldn't lie to yourself about what's actually going on. You should be able to be honest with yourself about what's going on in the situation and do it anyway if that's what you're going to do. But where you end up going afoul and where I see things go wrong is a lot of times you engage with the other side as if they're good faith actors, as if we're going to have a good faith conversation. And then I even see sometimes where our side walks away doubting their ideas and doubting what they think because they feel obligated to genuinely engage with the other side's ideas. Well, I got to go leave and now think about what that right winger said, or maybe he was right about philosophy. So a lot of times it feels like they're more likely to have an influence on us because you'll go into the conversation from a more genuine place, which makes you a sucker when you do that with a bad faith actor.
With somebody that's repeating a script and is very much like their sole intention is solely just to grow their audience and to fucking disseminate that script and to get other people to fucking like repeat that script themselves, to regurgitate it into their own lives. Like, and that's exactly what they do, especially with these fucking, the creationists are perfect. Like the thing that comes to my mind first is like, I don't know how many people in chats or fucking comment sections that I've seen that are literally verbatim regurgitating the same shit that they just heard one of these motherfuckers repeat in a debate, even though I don't even like to call it a debate because they're not honestly debating. They're just regurgitating a script. That's it.
Yeah, I do think it's more. I do think word wrestling entertainment is more apt. It's staged, it's scripted. Both parties knew what was going to happen before it happened, and it happened exactly as scripted. Maya said, "I have a love-hate relationship with Black Soul. They have a lot of dog shit take, but it also really captures the voice of the Black community sometimes, since we're mostly." Still mostly conservative. Maya, first off, I just have to admit, I was new. I didn't know they existed, and it was very disorienting. It was just so weird. But yeah, that's why I used it, because ultimately it really felt like if I had tried to have this conversation with my family or something like that, because we are so all conservative, and it also did capture that. It captured that if you take away the bright red conservative branding and go for something a little bit more funky, like purple and blue or whatever, and just give conservatism with a Black face on it, most Black people could get with that. And that to me says a lot about where Black America is. There's this idea that because so many Black people vote blue no matter who, that they're actually liberal. But no, I'm with you. Most Black folk are tragically conservative.
He soon knows the left only.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you think that's an all-encompassing thing, or do you think that's mainly more people in older age groups, or like age groups over like 30, or?
I think,
because I from Black people that I interact with within like leftist groups, like in my city where I live, they are way more left than I am even. Like, they are extremely left, but they're all very young. They're all like fucking between like goddamn 18 and like fucking like 28, 29 years old. Like, but they're all extremely left wing. Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know.
So,
Every generation is kind of like different.
so
No
again,
matter what.
I don't really know, but my sense is that it's pretty big in that it's shifting. So I think for older folks, okay, I made this point on a hot program yesterday, and I'm gonna keep saying it. It was the first time I made it, but it's really important to me. Black folk have always used Christianity to audition for full citizenship, and it's never worked. Okay. And so I think that part of it, right, and after Signifier talked about it too, is that, like, you know, when Black folks got their freedom, part of the program was to like get them to be good Christians. And so part of that was to like get them to have the same idea of what a family looks like, what a man does, what a woman does, right? And so I think a lot of it is the serious influence of Abrahamic religions versus directly in the sense of so many former slaves being Christian, and then a lot of you know, Black immigrants having Muslim religions, and yeah, either way you slice it, you get some patriarchal Abrahamic shit. I think a lot of, for the younger folks, I think it leans, there's still a lot of that, but there's also like a lot more like individualized capitalism. Like, there's more opportunity, so like now more of us can make it, and so now there's more like, let's make this thing happen. Like, let's really finally have Black economic power, right? And so that feeds you into the sort of more capitalist side of things. But what you're talking about is, I think religion overall is on the decline. I think our education levels are going up, and I think our social media consumption and shit is crazy. So I think there are a lot more of us getting smart. That does tend to lean younger. And then, like me, there's now social media and internet to help energize you more towards atheism, more towards socialism. And then when you reconnect that with your Blackness, then you get really more like radical progressivism, because you realize that that's just part of the, yeah. So I definitely think that that's the upside of it. Yeah, and we're just hoping that there's more of that, for sure.
Through caricature. It also trains him, if he does directly engage, to approach the left with the same combative stance as his role models. For reference, see my comment section. And this is only if he doesn't partake in one of the many active boycotts of SJW media. In addition to mocking the left's arguments, they also, curiously, appropriate them. This is one part sanitization, because liberal centrism is more socially acceptable. Indeed, many figures on the outer layers think of themselves as moderates, even as they serve as gateways to radicalism. But also, many of Gabe's problems could be addressed by progressive leftism, so they sell him racist and sexist versions of it. Yes, there is a problem with workers being underpaid and overextended, but the solution isn't unions, it's deporting immigrants. Yes, there is a chronic loneliness and anger to being a man in the modern age, but it's not because of the toxic masculine expectations placed on you by the patriarchy, it's women being slutty. Yes, wealth disparity does mean a tiny percentage of elites have more influence over culture and politics than the rest of us combined. But the problem isn't capitalism, it's the Jews. And it's hard for Gabe to reject any of these ideas without, in the process, rejecting the progressive ideas they're copied from. The right's take the red pill is, to the untrained eye, similar to the left's get woke, or at least the Bowdlerized version of get woke that is no longer specifically about race, which came to fashion once white people started saying it. Grumble, grumble, grumble.
All right, we love that. Also, just because I have a habit of saying that the right is woke, and this is what I mean when I say it. I don't mean literally that they're woke. I just mean that if you think about it, they're the ones that are constantly playing identity politics, bringing up, making everything a culture war, making everything about social issues. That's literally their agenda. They literally don't even bother to have policies anymore, y'all. Like,
Yeah.
so it's like they've made their grievances their entire personality. And but the sad thing is it's effective in that sense, because now it's like, if you have a female principal, that's a DEI woke hire, and score one for the left, like it just creates this way of thinking that is very tragic. And then the desire to put forward other people to say, hey, like, we need to focus on Black folks and stuff like that gets pushed to the back because it's seen as so politically charged that people would rather avoid it. And then when they get the opportunity, they don't avoid it at all. They're like, no, we're definitely going to take away trans people's rights now that we have the voting power to do that. We're definitely going to take away women's rights now that we had the voting power to do that. Oh, when you did it, all we had to do was make you afraid to touch it, right? That's why everything in this country goes to the right, because when the Republicans are in power, they move shit towards themselves. They gerrymander, they take power, they do what they're supposed to do. When the Democrats get in power, they go, well, we don't want to do that because that would set a bad example, because then the Republicans will do that when they're in power. Motherfucker, they always been doing that when they're in power. What do you think they're going to do? You got to at least try to undo what they did. Well, no, that would be political, and then it wouldn't create bipartisanship, and then we wouldn't be able to compromise it. And so we just lose. We always lose. And this is this type of losses we're now taking literally in like every area of life now. It's not just politics. It's workplace policy. It's sports. It's fucking all this fucking shit now. It's crazy. And yeah, make sure y'all sub up to Tsumami's channel. We gotta get that down in the description.
Take the red pill or reject them both. Either is a
sorry. Did you have something else you want to say, Tsumami?
As this,
or just hit the button. No, I guess we're good. Okay.
Rhetoric slips into his day-to-day conversation, even as seemingly harmless irreverence. It may strain relationships with people who are not entertained by this shit. Off-color comments about race and gender can certainly be wearying for female and non-white friends, which can lead to a passive distance or an eventual confrontation, which only seems to confirm what his reactionary community says about liberal snowflakes.
Yep.
If he says these things on social media, he may get his account suspended. And if he comes back under an alt, you can bet his new reactionary friends will be the first to reconnect, applaud the behavior that got him banned, and repeat should he get banned again. A few cycles of this, and he's lost touch with everyone else. Also, his adoption of the insular, meme-laden terminology of his community makes him less and less comprehensible to outsiders. Over time, sources of information get replaced with community-approved ones. Conservative news, conservative YouTube, conservative Wikipedia if he's really committed. The algorithm soon takes note and stops recommending media from the left. He stops watching shows with a liberal agenda, which usually means shows starring women and people of color. Now, there is evidence that the human mind responds to fictional characters similarly to real people, and that consuming diverse media can decrease bigotry in ways roughly analogous to having a diverse group of friends, which is one of many reasons we say representation matters. By consuming a homogenous media diet, Gabe stymies his ability to have even parasocial relationships with anyone who isn't a cishet conservative white dude or one of their approved exceptions. To the extent that any of this happens, it happens at Gabe's discretion and at his own chosen pace. It has not been forced on him, only encouraged and rewarded.
All right, so I just want to say, like, this is part of the way in which people do this to themselves, and that's why it's like really important to have media literacy and be like aware of what you consume. Something else I wanted to say is it's also why it's important to consume shit of people that are different than you. Like if you're white, like watch black media. If you're black, I tell you to watch white media, but you just call that watching media. Like, but no, it does. Like in that way, I think that that's where the empathy gap lies partially. It's not difficult for us to empathize with people differently than we are when you have to see them all the time. Even like, also, I just think it helps with centering, because you get to see somebody different than you as the star rather than a side character. And that helps you realize that the people in your own life that are different than you are nevertheless the star of their own life, right? And that the dramas that are playing out in their world are literally worth dramatizing. They're worth highlighting. They're movie worthy, right? And I think that does shift your politics and the way you think.
And that they're not any different from you. Like, that they live their lives the same way, that they have the same type of struggles, the same type of relationships, the same type of bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely. Maya says, shout out to all the white people who look at an all-black show panel and don't turn away thinking this is for them, not for me. Yes, absolutely, 100%. 100%.
The fact that it hasn't been forced can make him all the more willing to accept it, because it seems safe to consider. Even though his life and social circle are changing to accommodate, he does not feel committed. But many Gabes have walked these halls, and if they close the door behind them, there is nowhere left to go but down. Step 4, raise their power level. And they say we ruined anime. Consider the ecosystem of the alt-right as layers of an onion, with Gabe sitting at the edge and ready to traverse towards the center. No, I'm not just going to reiterate the Pewdie pipeline, though if you haven't seen it, I recommend that you do. The outer layer of the onion is extremism at its most plausibly deniable. Without careful scrutiny, the public-facing figureheads could pass as dispassionate, and the websites as merely problematic rather than softly fascist. It is valuable if Gabe believes this as well, that at this stage, he believed the bigotry is simply trolling, the extremists an insignificant minority, and any report of harassment faked. That he believe where he is as deep as the rabbit hole goes, and that he continue to believe this at each successive layer. People in the deepest crevices of the alt-right self-report getting red-pilled on multiple issues at different times in their journey to the center of the onion. If Gabe's first red pill is about the SJWs coming for his free speech, he'll think that's all anyone in his community believes. There's no real racism here, people are just making a point about their right to offend people. Then, when he gets red-pilled on the white genocide, he'll laugh at those alt-light cucks who tried to sweep the race realists under the rug, and at himself for having once been one, but acknowledge that those channels and websites are still useful for onboarding people, so he won't denounce them. At the same
You have this out here, gang, where like you literally have Nazis, literal Christian nationalists who debate on behalf of Christian nationalism, who will try to insinuate to someone like me, actually, shouldn't insinuate, will try to insist to someone like me that they're not racist. Matter of fact, they can't be racist because they actually debate the racist Nazis, because the racist Nazis happen to be race realists, and they're not even race realists. So how could they be racist?
See Andrew Wilson.
See Andrew Wilson.
At the same time, nobody takes those manosphere betas seriously. And this process is reiterated with every pill swallowed. Gender essentialism, autogynephilia, birtherism, Sandy Hook truth, Pizzagate, QAnon if he's really out there. The heart of the onion is typically the Jewish question, but these can happen in any order and in any number. But each layer sells itself as being finally the ultimate truth. Each denies the validity of the others. The layers ahead, they don't exist, and you are certainly not being directed towards them. They're just the fevered imaginations of overreacting liberals, while the people behind are asleep, where you are now awake. That's why they chose the red pill as their metaphor. Take it, and everything will be revealed. That's why it cozies up with conspiracism. But what's supposed to follow is that this knowledge help Gabe in some way, and it doesn't. Blaming immigrants doesn't actually fix the economy, and hating women doesn't make men less lonely. But having been alienated from everything outside the onion, once that sinks in, the only recourse on offer is to seek out the next pill. And pills are easy to find. Those within the network have laissez-faire relationships, even if they on paper disavow one another. When they need a source or a guest host, they aren't going to go to the left. They're going to feature each other. The left is the enemy. Their ideas are beneath consideration, and the only reason to engage them is for public humiliation. But you can interview a Western chauvinist, and that doesn't mean you're endorsing him. Just, it's fine to hear him out. Nothing should be off limits in the marketplace of ideas. Besides, Nazis are apolitical. And because these folks keep showing up in each other's metadata, regardless of what they say, Google thinks there is definitely a relationship between the guy just asking questions and the guy denying the Holocaust. Gabe.
Now, gang, that was incredibly profound right there. You may not think there's a connection between these things, but Google understands there's a relationship between the guy just asking questions and the guy denying the Holocaust. And that's why we got to be on alert too, right? Because in a sense, these sort of disruptions and infiltrations of our community are now literally algorithmically predictable. The only reason I don't talk more about the specific latest one is because it's just the latest one. According to the Maya theory of YouTube, we're due for a major incident of this sort annually around this time of year. There's maybe seasonal bigotry, and it gets warm and they start to shed their coats. I don't know how it works, but seriously, we've got it. We can't be so naive, right? We have to literally understand that as long as there's a Joe Rogan and a UFC blog and apologists pretending they're the next Jordan Peterson, we're always going to have these assholes popping up. Hey, you guys want to debate metaphysical objective reality, and we got to start to recognize, if I pull out enough strings, there's probably a Christofascism is going to come at this. That's all that this is going to lead to. All right, here's the lovely Tsumami.
Sorry, I have a...
Oh, plus kitten. Gang, I'm giving you Tsumami plus kitten tonight. Come on. This is the channel. You like, sub, comment, all that good stuff.
Another thing I think people don't think about is, aside from the harm that like these motherfuckers, when they infiltrate, do just to our community, there's also like how many people are going to like watch that stream later, or watch it, may not even be on your channel, they may watch like some mirror on that person's channel or something like that. And like how many people do not comment and don't comment in fucking live streams, they don't comment in fucking and video like comment sections, but they do watch. And like how many people are part of these marginalized groups that are being targeted, and like what they're thinking, and like what the algorithm now thinks of you, and where it's going to place your content, and like all of the fallout, not just the fallout within like our little group, but like there's a hell of a lot of fallout from
that. There is. No, that's a really good point. And I've thought about that too. Just the exposure, the ways in which if somebody drops a slur or insults somebody, that they did so in your channel, and that is in some way a reflection on you as a content creator. And it doesn't always mean something incredibly problematic. Like we had somebody I blocked earlier because they came through dropping some Trump Ramaswamy fucking nonsense. Like there's some stuff you can write off as, yeah, you know, you do something political, people who hold the opposite opinion are going to come through and troll your chat. That's a thing. But there's also a way in which you ask yourself, you know, if I wasn't doing this, or if I wasn't talking to this person, then like maybe my friend wouldn't have got insulted today in public, you know, on YouTube. And yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a thing I think a lot of people are not aware of. So right, so if we're going to have this conversation, we're going to talk to people, this isn't a really important thing for us to mention. Like these are the things we'd like you to think through, is like yo, your friends are getting insulted and all this shit, and we didn't have to do this today. Yeah.
Well, I still say, like, even if it's not my friend, even if it's not somebody that I know, like,
Sure.
it's I can't understate the value of fucking calling that shit out, regardless of whether it's somebody you know and you have like a level of loyalty to. Like, Pinky, come on, dude. It's like cat fucking. Sorry, I have a menagerie over here.
Maybe I said that. Maybe.
Is softly exposed to many flavors of conservatism, just slightly more radical than he is now, and is expected, at the very least, to not question their presence. This is an environment where de-radicalizing, listening to the left, would be sleeping with the enemy. But radicalizing further, you do you, buddy. Gabe's emotional journey, however, is somewhat more complex. If you spend any time reading or watching reactionary media, you've probably noticed it's really fucking repetitive. It's a few thousand phrasings of the same handful of arguments, like there's only so many jokes about attack helicopters. But these people just crank out content, and most of it's derivative. The reason to pick one personality over another isn't because they say something different, but because they say it differently. Gabe just picks the affect it's delivered in. Repetition dulls the shock of the most egregious statements, making them appear normal and prepping him for more extreme ideas. Meanwhile, the arguments themselves, they're not good. Like, BreadTube will never run out of shit to debunk. They are repetitive because they're not good. They're mantric. A good argument you only need to hear one time. If you can follow it, internalize it, and explain it to someone else, you know you've understood it. But a bad argument can't convince you on its own merits, so it will often rely on affect. This can be the snappy, thought-terminating cliche, or the long, winding diatribe that sounds really sensible while you're hearing it, but when someone asks you for the gist, you can only say, go watch these 17 videos and it'll all make sense.
And this is kind of where I'm at with like so many of the conversations we have too, where again, part of I think what it feels like people don't realize is a lot of these conversations they're only had because they're silly, because they're stupid arguments, right? Like if somebody thinks that they have a good argument or a good topic that they could debate, as in, let's be honest, usually as a religious person and usually as a religious right-winger, that they could debate an atheist or someone on the left about, we already know we're talking about something stupid. Right? Like I know this sounds crazy, but like there aren't a lot of, right? So you're already dealing with a certain type of person. You're dealing with somebody who's going to argue that the science is on their side. Come on, bro. Nobody that knows the first thing about science is going to believe that. Nobody that has any level of any philosophical sophistication thinks arguing the nature of materialism is going to get you anywhere towards establishing your worldview, right? Like, so
But you have to have that level of education to be able to spot that.
I guess I will tell you this. That is the thing that concerns me. The thing that concerns me is that they're very good at talking over people's heads, and they're very good at like talking about things that sound very, very sophisticated. And sometimes they're things that are, valid concepts or valid rhetoric from a particular field. And then using that to basically take the conversation to somewhere no one would understand. And that's a real problem for me. Because they just sound smart, and it's hard for people don't know how to debunk their sophisticated sounding rhetoric.
Well, if they just use certain terms, even if they don't actually know what they mean, I feel like there's a lot of people that, yeah, they're not even going to try to approach it to try to enter the argument at all. That, or they'll just kind of regurgitate the same thing, like that "what's it, motherfucker." Like his fans, like, it's crazy how these people seem to think that they are like incredibly knowledgeable and like well educated. It's like, I don't even think you guys understand the words that you're using. Like, I mean, you're, aside from the fact that they're literally just repeating what he says, if they're even able to do that. Like, I generally don't think that they understand like some of the basic like definitions of the words that they're using, and it's
Yeah. And they also do like a mix. There's like a mix of using like rhetoric that's correct and rhetoric that's not, and I think that like makes it a bit harder to follow their tracks. And so there's a lot of dirty tactics. All right, let's roll some more tapes, Tsumami. I'm like we could talk about this forever. I got so many thoughts. I'm like, wait, let's get back to the video.
Jay wants to catch that game that's coming on soon.
Both these approaches are largely devoid of content, but gosh, if they don't sound sure of themselves. And that mode can be very persuasive, but it doesn't stick the way a coherent argument does. It needs to be repeated, the affect replenished, because the words matter less than the delivery. There needs to be a steady stream of confident voices saying, "We've got this shit figured out and everyone else is stupid," or Gabe's gonna notice the flaws. They are not well hidden. And the catch-22 of returning to that stream over and over is that these communities are stressful even as they are calming. People afraid they will die virgins go to forums with people who share and validate that fear, and also say, yes, you will die a virgin. People afraid Syrians are coming to kill us all watch videos by people who share and validate that fear, and also say, yes, Syrians are coming to kill us all. Others have already pointed out that rubbing your face in your worst anxieties is a form of digital self-harm, but I need you to understand the toxic recursion of it. Gabe is going to these communities to get upset. Every emotion is converted into anger because sadness, fear, and despair are paralyzing, but anger is motivating. Whatever his problems, there's always someone he can scapegoat for them, and Gabe feels less helpless when he's pissed off. And so while he's topping up on reassuring nonsense, he's also topping up on stress. And being cut off from everyone outside the network, the only place he knows to go to release that stress is back to the place that gives it to him. It's a feedback loop, pulling him deeper and deeper on the promise that, at some point, relief will come. It is a similar dynamic that keeps people in abusive relationships. When someone in Gabe's community makes a racist joke, they are presenting Gabe with a choice between the human interaction of laughing with his friends and his societal responsibility not to be a fucking racist. And not laughing seems ridiculous. Everybody's friends here, no one's getting hurt. This is harmless. And so the irreverent race joke draws a line between the personal and the political and suggests that one can be safely prioritized over the other. One way to look at radicalization is being asked to stick with that seemingly innocuous decision as the stakes are raised incrementally. First with edgier humor, and then comments that are funny because they're shocking, but you couldn't really call them jokes, and then funny comments that are also sincerely angry. But in each instance, since he laughed with his bros the last time, it stands to reason he should keep favoring the personal over some abstracted notion of politics. This is why the progressive adage, the personal is political, is among the most threatening things you can say in these spaces.
And this is why, like, the waters get tested, because a lot of times what a person will do is they will gradually increase in who they're insulting and what their insults are or what their inappropriate comments are. And they'll often start with something about the person they're talking to, because let's be honest, we're usually talking about a conversation a lot of times between two white guys. And so if they can insult or joke in a way that feels safe for each other, it's like, oh, well, then when you told that off-color joke about this other group, I kind of had to let that go too, because we already established that it's all good to joke or whatever. But that's a thing I see happen quite a bit. Right? Like they'll make a joke about a different like region of the country or some shit like that. Like that's harmless. Like nobody really cares. Nobody's gonna have a fight over you teasing me about being from the South or whatever. But then later I can like say something a little bit more inflammatory and it's supposed to be all good because like, yo, man, you laughed at my joke about people from the South. Like, why are you mad I want to joke about gay people now, right? Like, I don't know. It's just me. It's just me.
I'm not trying to make a slippery slope argument. Most of us who laughed at edgy jokes when we were teenagers didn't grow up to be Nazis. It is a slippery slope in the specific context of being in community with people trying to radicalize you. Gabe is a lonely white boy in need of friends, and laughing at a racist joke is personal, and not laughing is political. Staying in a community that has Nazis in it is personal, and leaving is political. The personal is what brings people together, and the political drives them apart. The only if some of them are bigots part of that sentence is usually lopped off. There's this joke on the internet that nerds perceive only two races, white and political. Following that logic, what could be more apolitical than an ethno-state? They are banking on his willingness to adapt his beliefs to suit an environment that meets a need. That same need can be satisfied by white nationalism. There are few things more seductive to people who doubt their own worth than being told, you are valuable simply for being white. And you can sub in male, cis, straight, allosexual, or able-bodied. It just takes priming. By the time Gabe officially embraces bigotry, he's already been acting like a bigot for months. The red pill is just the moment he says it out loud. Change Gabe's surroundings, and you change Gabe. Step 5. The final step in a traditional extremist group would be getting a mission. But that is one thing the alt-right can't do. Once you start giving clear directives, you can't play yourselves off as a bunch of unaffiliated hashtags and think tanks. You are now a formalized movement accountable to its followers, and can be judged and policed as such. To my mind, Charlottesville was an attempt to become such a movement, taking things offline and getting all the different groups working collectively. And as so often happens when these people get in the same space, especially with no official leaders and no means of control over their members, it backfired. Their true colors came out before they were ready, and a counter-protester lost her life. This would be the point where historically an extremist group starts to disintegrate. Their veneer of respectability gone, they are now hated by the public, the media wants nothing more to do with them, and everyone not in jail turns on each other or goes underground. This is also the point where the liberal establishment says, my job here is done, and utterly fails to retake control of the narrative, allowing the next batch of radicals to pick up more or less where the last one left off. But to an already decentralized...
The other thing that's very interesting about this, y'all, is if you check out the timing on this, this was 4 years ago. So I'm not sure that this may not have been like even like before January 6th, because I'm very much feeling like that's what happened. Like Charlottesville happened, they went underground, and then they did January 6th. That was their next big coming out party.
Can I just say, I don't think that the reaction to Charlottesville would have been as bad if it wasn't a white girl that was killed, and I don't think that the reaction to January 6th would have been as bad from certain people if it wasn't for Capitol Police being attacked. I think if it was Black counter protesters that had been attacked, that things would be very different, and that people would be, the media and most people would be talking about Charlottesville and January 6th in a very different kind of light. I don't think it would be anywhere near as considered it as such a problem.
Well, it's very interesting. Of course, you know, the reality for Black folk was January 6th was, you know, my dad called me and like got me out of bed. Like, you got to see what they're doing. Like, you're not gonna believe what's happening. He's like, you don't know what's going on? No, just turn on the TV. Where? What do you want me to? Anything. Turn on anything. Just anywhere. Just turn on anything. Okay. And then it was literally like, this would never happen if they were Black people. So of course it was just revealing the hypocrisy that's always been there, because you know they've always lied about the patriotism and the law and order and the system and the justice and the democracy. That's all been part of that act we talked about, right? That's been part of the building slave labor to build, using slave labor to build an ivory tower that women and people of color can't attend, and then acting like, and like you said, congratulating yourself for you know, for winning civilization or whatever.
Being the masters of the universe. That's
being
actually
the
a line.
masters of the universe. There you go. Yeah,
and that's a line from Titanic. That's what she tells Jack, because she says, "Oh, they're out smoking. They're in the I forget what is it, the Turkish fucking fast or whatever the hell it is. They're smoking cigars and congratulating themselves on being the masters of the universe." And that's very much like that same that atmosphere of like the fucking the private space where the fucking cis heterosexual white men gather to smoke the cigars and like discuss the world and politics and basically how they are still in charge of things.
Yeah.
I have to say about January 6th, I was unfortunately not surprised because I watched the planning of it play out on Periscope, because I watched Ali Alexander, my Periscope account. I don't know if, I'm sure he was probably I'm actually, you know what, I'm pretty sure he was not like, he might have been multi-streaming, but I'm pretty sure Periscope was his like platform, his main platform initially. And like, yeah, I watched this shit, the planning of this shit for months and months and months, and watched these discussions happen in live streams on Periscope. And when it finally happened, I was just like, no, I know you people knew that this was going to happen. I know people knew that this was going to happen, because there's no way. The amount of fucking people that would be watching his live streams every fucking day, not just his, but other people's live streams. He was the one that obviously stood out the most to me, because I was like, excuse me? You looked in the mirror, sir? Because you're the same color that I am. And right. I'm pretty sure, like, you're not going to be fucking, like, included in this fucking shit that you want to fucking like lay down and fucking doormat for when the fucking time really comes. But yeah, like that was not watching that shit being like literally planned out and talked about openly on fucking live streams. I like it gets me so agitated, like I can't even like talk.
So something I think that's interesting is that still has not been really discussed, right? The level to which it was openly planned on social media, and also the level to which churches openly helped organize it. I haven't seen any stories about it. I've heard people tell their story online about churches being involved in organize it, but I have seen next to no media coverage of the fact that churches were involved in organizing January 6th. But you know, a lot of them did, like literally like, we're going to take a bus, and you know, like they were just so on that Trump is the chosen one bullshit. Mm. Many
Too
saw
many
it coming.
Christians on both sides of the lines. I think that's why. Too many people
That's
know somebody
100% my
when
feeling.
somebody that they love, and it may not even be somebody that they just love. It's somebody that they often share fucking familial ties with. That they are still a very devout Christian, and they don't. People don't want to fucking like, reach that subject because
Yeah.
politics is one thing, religion is like that's a
See, my
whole
thing,
nother.
my thing is, and I know I'm being silly, but like, I think that's the thing. Is this like, it's like everybody's so afraid to do it because of that. But at the same time, if everybody did it because of that, it'd be obvious. It'd be like you just be like, oh, I was trying to tell you. Yeah, see, I know, because now you see it on the news. Like we turn the news and they're like, and it's like, yeah, so it turns out God isn't real. That's literally what I want. Y'all don't understand how naive I am about this shit. I literally want like MSNBC and CNN and all the motherfuckers to be like, oh, it turns out the jig is up and record numbers of people are leaving the church. Does this mean God isn't real? Like, for real? Like, that's what I actually want to happen. And then it's just like easy. There's like a big grand coming out party, and it's I know, y'all. Don't. I know. Look,
That's
it's
the thing
very
though, is it's just like you're risking, like your fucking mom or your dad or your grandma, whoever, not talking to you for fucking months or maybe cutting you out entirely.
yeah.
They're basically, it's the same kind of thing. Well, we might have a fuckload of viewers that are immediately like, what? You're targeting Christians? Boop, turn that shit off. And they never turn it back on. And like,
Yeah, it's that's the thing. That's how they have us. They literally have us all like captivated.
capped.
Yeah, captive because of fear. And honestly, the really sad part is what we lose as a result. Like one day I was talking to, I remember, Lena, about all the problems we could tackle and all the ways we could advance society if we got rid of religion. And then she was like, think about the things we would have already tackled. Like that's what we don't think about. We don't mourn for all the things that they've like held up. Because that's what makes me sad. Like, you realize there's no reason people should be homeless and, can't go to college, can't afford a place to live, like can't afford food. Like, all of these are some of the stuff, like curing cancer, getting us off the planet. Like, there's some stuff we got to work on, but there's a lot of this major ills of society that are totally solvable.
Well, in this country anyway,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense that I mean, now we're breaching into like socialism. Like there's certain social services and certain things that it just doesn't make sense that we don't have these as like basic healthcare, basic mental health care. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, these things should be just normal. I don't know.
Here's
I'm gonna
my
get
thing.
derailed.
I don't even know. It's okay. I don't even think those are liberal policies. I actually think in a normal, like,
They're not.
rational world, those would be considered not necessarily conservative, but they'd be considered like the baseline. Like, they just be considered like the
Well,
obvious human decency things. And now let's talk about your politics on some edge
I
shit.
mean, look at pretty much every other Western world country. They do have forms of socialized healthcare and shit like that. And they absolutely, motherfuckers in the UK and Canada absolutely look at us like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? Even very conservative motherfuckers over there are like, what? Like, you're basically just gonna die if you like get sick? Like, what? They're just like so baffled by that. Like, and I don't know how often like I see comments on stuff that has nothing to do with like fucking politics, religion, anything like that. Like thinking about like true crime cases where like thinking about one where there was an old man that somebody left in like England. It turns out he was from America, and like these British people were fucking disgusted by like how our treatment of older people, and like our basically we just don't provide them with any health care. We're not going to
Nope.
provide them with shit. We don't care. Like we literally pretty much just let people die in the fucking street, and we're the wealthiest, most powerful country, and wah, let's make America great again. Oh, we have people dying in the fucking street out here, dying in the hospital waiting rooms and shit, getting kicked out of hospitals early because they don't have insurance to cover. Like, it, it's absurd. It's absurd. And you're right. It absolutely is not. It shouldn't be considered a liberal policy. It shouldn't be considered a liberal agenda. It should just be a basic fucking like human rights. Like that's how shit should be. And it's bizarre that it's even painted as like, oh, you guys are socialists. I mean, like, I'd say there are plenty of people in Canada and the UK that are conservatives that they absolutely think that socialized healthcare is just a normal thing. I'm sorry, see, like this is what I'm talking about. I'm getting so derailed. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. This is fun. All right, here we go.
Group like the alt-right, Charlottesville was bad, but eminently survivable. People retreated back to the internet with its code words and anonymous forums, but that's where much of the work was already done anyway. The platforms where they organized kept tolerating them, the authorities didn't classify them as terrorists, and any disgraced figureheads were replaced with up-and-comers. The major change in strategy is that it doesn't seem anyone has tried to formalize the alt-right since. So where does that leave Gabe? He's gone through this whole process of largely hands-off indoctrination, and I should stress, his journey may look like what we've outlined here, or it may look different in places. This video is not comprehensive. But now he's swallowed every pill he cares to, he blames half a dozen minorities for everything he sees as wrong with the world, and no one will give him anything to do. You've got this ad hoc movement frothing young men into a militant fervor, and then just leaving them to stew in their own hate. Should we really be surprised at how many commit mass shootings? This is a machine for producing lone wolves. Leaving men to take up arms of their own volition is a way of enacting terror while being just outside the popular conception of a terror cell. There are also, of course, more classic militias that will offer Gabe clear directives. They are recruiting from the same pool. And Gabe may stop short of this, settling in a middle layer that suits him or finding the inner layers too extreme. But violence is the logical conclusion of an ideology of hate. And should Gabe take this step, he can approach violence in the same incremental fashion he approached conservatism. He can start with yelling at people on Twitter, and then maybe collective brigading, DDoS attacks, sharing docs, leaking nudes, calling their phone numbers, texting them pictures of their houses from the sidewalk. These acts of cruelty become games of one-upmanship within his community. All this can start as far back as step 2 and get more intense the deeper he goes. And some people join explicitly to partake in harassment and violence the way Gabe joined to talk about anime. But this behavior can serve as a kind of buy-in.
All right, and this is another thing I'm gonna talk about. There's so much intersectionality. There's just so much. This has been really great, and of course we have Tsumami with us. But here's another thing I want people to think about. Okay, because a big part of our case to lay out is you gotta ask, why are people in these spaces? And you gotta remember, from my perspective, a lot of marginalized people are in these spaces because, again, like you, this is where they found community around certain identities. This is, where being a a woman who likes to speak out about issues is accepted, and they're fucking liberal socialist black people out here and LGBTQ people. So it becomes what I call a counter space. You should look that term up, and I didn't make it up. It's like a recognized thing. There's spaces that marginalized people used to provide each other support and resiliency. I think safe space is sort of a shortcut for counter spaces in many ways. But I think I like the term counter spaces because there's kind of more to it than that. But anyway, one of the things I wanted to bring up here is part of what we do in counter spaces is transparency. And transparency increases your degree of sociality with people. So the way I would explain this to people is, there are a lot of people, like Tsumami said, that just watch these streams. they don't ever leave comments or engage in the live chat. I appreciate them. Love y'all, all the lurkers. Y'all are the real ones. Appreciate y'all. Keep it tight. Much love. But I don't know that much about them, right? I don't know their screen names. I don't know what they think. I don't know how they talk. I don't know anything about them, right? People who leave comments, right, but don't watch live streams, I kind of know a little bit about them. People who are active in the live chat, I get to know way better than a person who just leaves comments, because there's real-time interaction between them, other people in the community. They get to know each other, right? And then think about that. That's true, and that just keeps going. So people who have avatars that are themselves, you feel more intimacy with than people who their avatar is just like an animated character or like an animal or something. People who use their real name, right? Part of what I love about a content creator like Stephanie is I know that her real name is Stephanie Catherine Helms. She lives in the mains areas, does sailboats. I don't know, like I know Stephanie just recently won 2 sailboat races in the last week, right? That's being real. I know Robert Reed lives in Texas, Texas Longhorn legend, Hook 'em Horns, women's self-defense instructor. You see what I'm saying? Like, y'all know me, I'm not hard to find. So, but what I want people to think about is that's important a lot of time to our sense of community, is our ability to be real with each other. But when you interact with these unsafe, scary motherfuckers, that leads to community vulnerability, right? And so that's another thing to consider, is that like the marginalized people who do participate in spaces like this are vulnerable a lot of times. They're not that hard to find. And, that means we want to be careful about who we bring in, but just something else for folks to think about.
The left and the feminists and the LGBTQs and the Muslims and the immigrants are all within his community subhuman. You've maybe heard the conservative catchphrase, feminism is cancer. Well, you don't treat cancer by having a respectful exchange of ideas with it, but by eradicating it down to the last cell. Cruelty against the left is framed as necessary and righteous. From any other perspective, posting someone's bank information is something you might feel ashamed of, which creates a psychological imperative not to consider other perspectives. A thing that keeps people in is staving off the guilt they will reckon with the moment they step out. Gabe is also aware that anything he's done to the left could be done to him if he leaves. Some communities even keep docs on their members as insurance. And the things he's encouraged to do to the left will likely make him feel that the left would never take him now. The radical right is the only home he's got. Harassment becomes another tool of isolation. Steadily, options for Gabe are whittled down to being a vigilante or a nihilist. There are periods of elation, moments the alt-right feels it's winning, or more accurately, the people they hate are losing, are like cocaine. They are authoritarians after all. But the times in between are mean and angry. They are antisocial, starved of emotional connection, consuming incompatible conspiracies that may at any point run them afoul of one another, devoted to figureheads who cater to but cannot risk leading them, and living under constant threat of being outed to the left or turned on by the right for stepping out of line. Gabe took this journey for the sense of community and purpose, and but for the rare moments everything goes their way, the alt-right can't maintain either. They can only keep promising his day will come, a story he could get from a $5 palm reading. The feeling there's nothing left but to kill yourself or someone else is so common, it's a meme. But there is a third option. Gabe can leave. Pre-conclusion, for fuck's sake, do not make Gabe your whole ass praxis. Before we continue, I want to state plainly that Gabe went off the deep end because he found a community willing to tell him that because he is a cishet white man, the world revolves around him. Do not treat him like this is true. If A fraction of the energy spent having debates with America's Gabes were spent instead on voter reenfranchisement, prisoners' rights, protections for immigrants, statehood for DC, and redistricting. Gabe's opinions, in the societal sense, wouldn't matter. Reactionary conservatism is a small and largely unpopular ideology that is only so represented in our culture and politics because they've learned how to game the system.
But this, y'all, this is something that we've also been trying to talk to, and it's really hard. Again, especially because of the genre of the content we make and having these debates and conversations with these people. But they don't have to be the star of the show. And unfortunately, what happens is, again, we've done everything to create a space where they're welcome so we can engage them. And then not only do you have the phenomena of like I said, when people speak out or speak against it, they get challenged more than the problematic people do. But that is also what feeds into this phenomenon of when we talk about the actual like substantive issues where we need people's support for those issues, if they ever get discussed at all, they get pushed to the back burner, and they also get labeled as radical or, you know, really, really crazy. Like, how many people just literally thinks talking about reparations is insane? How often do people actually talk about redistricting compared to should we allow trans girls to play soccer, right? Like, they dominate all the airwaves, and then we're like, yo, could we get some support for like making sure that like books about Black people aren't banned from the public school library? People like, no, we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about the axiology of the epistemology of your ontology. And we're like, yeah, nobody gives a fuck. And this is why we're telling you nobody gives a fuck, because they coming after us on some real shit right now. Go ahead, Tsumami.
Because a large part of the problem is not even just that they let motherfuckers like that into the space, but that they completely fucking make them the star of the show. Like fucking Jim Bobs. I don't even care. I'm gonna call that situation out as the example.
Sure, that's fine.
Not only are we allowing Jim Bob and his little Nazi fucking troop to come in, but we're gonna make him the fucking star of the goddamn circus, like for fucking days on end. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
You can't
what
count how many Jim Bob videos there have been in the last 3 weeks. You can't
Everybody's
count.
got to jump on the Jim Bob fucking bandwagon. We all got to get our 5 fucking minutes of like, oh, Jim Bob's the hot topic. He's the star of the fucking circus for this fucking goddamn like season. Like, talk about like letting motherfuckers know, like, hey, we're gonna play into your delusion that you are the center of the universe. Let's make you the fucking center of the universe, even in a fucking goddamn counter space that is primarily filled with fucking marginalized people or their allies. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, and that's because that's where they get off on the fact that they're successfully infiltrating the left. And why I think a lot of times, I hate to say this, but a lot of times part of the reason I think people should seriously consider not engaging with them is because they're not ready to. There's a certain sophistication that they have with regard to these social dynamics, with regard to interacting in these spaces, and like it shows, and it's really frustrating, but it definitely happens. Yeah. But you're right. They become the star. Okay, the other thing I was gonna say is this is also part of the reason I've been saying that I'm like not as impressed with some of these takedowns as I'm supposed to be, because they all take down the syllogism, they all take down the arguments, but they never get into the Nazism. They never get into why this person's problematic to begin with.
Well, of course, we can't have ad hominem attacks, Jay. We can't be talking about people's personal beliefs or how they like. Get out of here with that shit.
Yeah, but
I'm so tired of that.
that makes me think you don't see it, right? That makes me think you either don't see it or don't care, and that you think the syllogism's more important. And it's like, cool, I'm glad you realized the syllogism was bullshit. I don't know who you thought believed it to begin with.
It very much makes me feel like they absolutely do see it, and they definitely don't give a fuck.
Yeah, well, that's
how I feel.
I think that's a reasonable
especially when
takeaway.
There's people like, especially when there's people in the background like, "Hey, he's a Nazi though." Hey, he's a Nazi. By the way, he's a fucking Nazi. Oh, guess what? He threatened to fucking throw me in an oven last week. Yeah, you guys, some of y'all absolutely do fucking see it and hear it and know, but you very much choose to fucking ignore this shit.
And part of that is, I think they've labeled our particular crew as like the woke, crazy left DEI thugs, that the cancel mob. But that's because I think that's part of how they get people to not listen to us is yeah.
I think a large part of it is also just fucking FOMO. Like, not even thinking about this space, but thinking about other spaces, other groups that I have been in over the years that, yeah, that's part of why I chose to left and fucking skewed everybody with a fucking firm hand, is because, like, wow, y'all are just gonna let fucking Nazis, like, run the goddamn show, okay? Let's get the ringmaster hat out and fucking put it on the Nazi and crown them the fucking king of the circus. Like, yeah, that would be why like I've left some of those groups over the years, is because it's not even just that, oh, you're painted as the person that you're the one that's actually like upsetting everything. You're the one that's ruining the
the community. See, I was gonna highlight Bree's comment. Bree said,
just that.
I just cancel everyone.
A lot of people, they don't want to be left out of the fucking group. They don't want to be left out of the group. Let's all like laugh along. It's much easier and much more, I don't know, I guess it's just easier to fucking like keep your existing friend group and like let's not
that comment about
we can still be friends even though we have different political beliefs and you want to throw me into an oven, like.
So that was that comment about laughing and remaining in the group is personal and leaving is political, and that's the hard thing. Yeah. Bree said, I just cancel everyone, I guess. Yeah, Bree, that's what I was talking about. And they literally say you're ruining the community. Not you, but that's the comment that people who are labeled that way get. I'm sure you've heard that as well. And we were saying to people earlier, like they literally say that to us, like not joking, like it's a thing they actually say to us in English words that we can understand. It's crazy, y'all.
And I get it. Those are huge problems that are going to take years to address, where if you know a Gabe, that's a conversation you could have today. And if you think you can get through to him, it's worthwhile to try. This is a fight on many fronts, and de-radicalization is one of them. But it is only one. So please keep it in perspective. It sends an awful message when we spend more time trying to get bigots back on our side than we do the people they are bigoted against. Your value as a lefty does not hinge on whether you can change Gabe's mind. Conclusion. How Gabe gets out. He may just grow out of it. These communities skew young, and some folks hit a point where hanging out with edgy teens doesn't feel cool anymore. He may become disillusioned after the movement fails to deliver on its many promises. He may become disillusioned if something goes wrong in his life and his community isn't there for him. If he feels they like his race and his gender, but don't actually care about him. He may be shocked if he sees the alt-right at its worst before being appropriately conditioned. Charlottesville was a step too far for a lot of people. His community may turn on him for any perceived unorthodoxy, and he may leave out of necessity. He may be separated by circumstance from the community, a trip with no internet, hospitalization, arrest, and not be able to top up on the rhetoric. This may lead him to question his beliefs. His community may disappear, either tearing itself apart or getting shut down by authorities. He may have incidental contact with populations he is supposed to hate and have trouble reconciling who they are in person with what he's been told about them.
All right, now this is interesting real quick, just because this is something that can happen out here, especially with the channels and the different content creators people can get exposed to. And I think genuinely ridiculing people or cutting them off also has that power of somebody might come engaging antagonistically, but recognize, oh, these people are actually pretty entertaining, or this community is pretty cool, or I kind of like hanging here. And then if they realize, oh, that type of bullshit actually isn't accepted into this community I genuinely actually want to participate in, it can be something that gets a person to reconsider their behavior. But of course, that has to be made clear to them. And I think there's all too many cases where I've seen, and I hate to say this, I've seen cases where I think even a lot of times people that are antagonistic to us, or they're quote unquote on the other side, uh, we're like their friends. Like, I hate to say it, but it's just like, look, we all know you like hang out with us because like you like us more than the people that you're supposed to agree with. And there's a reason you're in all our streams and like not even that many of theirs. And you like interacting with people here more because people here are cooler and they're like better people. But unfortunately, they're still allowed to like blast walls of scripture at us rather than like engage like decent people. But we're working on them. we're working on them. Oh no.
In his community, people bond over shared intolerance, but suddenly being tolerant helps him make friends. This is one reason the alt-right has made a battleground of the liberal arts college campus. He may form or revisit relationships outside the network, people who can offer him the connection he's been looking for. This may reintroduce outside perspectives, but more importantly, it rekindles his ability to have healthy relationships at all, something the alt-right has estranged him from. As with recruiters, it seems these escape hatch relationships can sometimes be parasocial, coming to respect a public figure who is on the left or is critical of the alt-right. Someone he is close to may compel him to choose me or the movement. A lot of young men leave to save a romantic relationship. Hearing stories from people who've already jumped may help. There aren't a lot of public formers, and some raise questions as to their sincerity, but it is getting more common and maybe the closest we get to exit counseling for the alt-right. He may become aware of the ways he's being manipulated, or have them revealed to him, maybe because he stumbled into BreadTube, I don't know. Knowledge that you are being indoctrinated is no guarantee it won't work. You are not immune to propaganda, but it can help one resist. And he may revisit a core belief system that used to guide him, be it religion or social justice, or a really wholesome fandom, and be reminded of the identity he used to have. Moments like these, in isolation or in aggregate, can inspire Gabe to jump. They are also good times for friends to intervene. The reach and the impunity that comes with the internet means it has never been easier to fall into reactionary conservatism. It has also never been easier to get out. People who exit skinhead gangs often fear for their lives. For Gabe, there's a chance getting out is as simple as going to a different website. Much of his community does not know his name or his face, and he may not be important enough to dox. What doesn't get Gabe out, not reliably, not that I have seen, is an argument with a stranger who proves all his facts wrong and his ideology bunk. Facts don't always work, because facts don't care about his feelings. This was about staying in a community and holding on to an identity that mattered to him. It was about belonging. And that is something a rando from the other side of the culture war can't give him and probably shouldn't be responsible for. The theme here is human connection. Before he can do the work of disentangling himself and facing the guilt of what he's believed and maybe done, he has to know there's something for him on the other end of it.
All right, so this is what's so weird for me, is so like I think it's important to consider this perspective, this idea that like debunking someone's arguments and schooling them in debate and all that shit is not effective. That like it actually doesn't work. And it's strikes me as odd that people pride themselves on being such critical thinkers, but won't think critically about whether or not what they're doing works. Like it's just very weird. But also it strikes me to think about what it is good for doing. And that is this sort of like social thinking, this sort of community building, this like finding a group to identify with and like, you know, grow deeper into the meaningfulness with or whatever. And like that's kind of my deal. Like, you know, like when I was sitting home alone during the pandemic, okay, like everybody else, I thought it'd be super cool to get a YouTube channel going and debate the creationist as an evolutionary biologist and like show people how great I am at making them creationists cry or whatever. I don't fucking know. And at some point you just realize like that shit's not happening. That's like not how it works. But it is, but I have met a lot of really great people. I have done this other stuff that he was just talking about. You know, finding other content creators to be a fan of, like meeting people in relationships where I was like making friends and um you know, being pro-social actually led to making more friends and all this type of shit. So all those good things can like definitely happen in this space, but my main point is that to me that's another reason you shift your focus, and the focus should become more on the community that you are building with like-minded people, particularly if, you know, having allyship of particular groups is important to you and you now get to have friends and content that appeals to people in those groups. Like you should recognize that that has a lot of value. And the reason you've been able to do that is to some extent because you're probably effective at that, or you're good at that, or you have a community. I think it's largely the community. It's largely the company you keep and the quality of the company you keep on your channel. So I think that makes it okay too. Like that makes it easier. It's like look, the other side, they're not buttering your bread anyway. When your channel grows, it's not going to be because more of them are following you. It's going to be because more of these like-minded people are like, oh, I like what I'm getting here. Oh, I like this community. So like, it's okay to focus on that anyway. Just my 2 cents. Tsumami, do you have anything? Or I guess we're almost done here, and then we'll chizat.
The right hasn't ruined him. They've told him all of history is groups fighting each other over status and that without his clan, he'll be in exile. He needs a better story. I don't know that lefty spaces are ideal for this, in no small part because bringing someone who's a bit of a Nazi but working on it into diverse communities is questionable. And it probably wouldn't be good for him either. Having just gotten out of a toxic belief system, he's going to be deeply skeptical of all ideologies. In a perfect world, people who care about Gabe could build for him, to use a therapy term, a holding space. Someplace private, physical or digital, where Gabe can work out his feelings, where he is both encouraged and expected to be better, but is not in the moment judged. That comes later. It is delicate and time-consuming work that should not be done in public, but we find these beliefs built up over the course of months or years tend to fall away very quickly with a shift of environment.
All right, now this is another thing too, and yes, this is all going to be a shameless plug for Gather, but it's very difficult to replace someone's sort of digital social life in person. It's much easier to give them an alternate online environment. And one of the things that I notice about all this YouTube shit is like you're just not going to have a lot of meaningful social interactions because it's YouTube. It's not only is it public, but it's live and it's recorded and it's a show with an audience who's expecting to be entertained. So, you know, there's only so much that's going to happen, but there's a lot of times in a space like Gather where, you know, a lot of us just feel a lot safer asking questions or saying things we'd be way more vulnerable about, and just sharing things because we're not live. We know it's a safe space to really get into things, but I honestly, that's a plug for like anything. That's like a plug for anything you can use to like enhance these relationships away from YouTube. I don't care if it's Instagram, Twitter, Discord, Kick, group chats on Facebook, group chats on your phone. But like seriously, like you kind of owe it to yourself, I think, um, to take the parasocial relationships you might have in your life and do something to make some of them social. I can't think of what my life would be like without the relationships I have with other people. And though a lot of that's hanging out people and Gather, there's definitely a lot of people that I just talk to on a different social media app, or I email, or I talk to on Discord, and all of those type of things help. And people and I do part of the reason I keep doing this is because even though you don't see a lot of like me interacting or like debating or having conversations with people on the channel, people are much more vulnerable and do ask me meaningful things offline all the time.
Change Gabe's surroundings and you change Gabe. But instead, a lot of people who jump are functionally deprogramming themselves, which is working for a lot of them, but it's haphazard. And there are recidivists. If you don't personally know a Gabe or have training as a counselor, you may not be in a position to help him. Possibly there are things you can do to disrupt the recruitment process or prevent infiltration of spaces you're in. I'm looking into it, but talk to your mods. But elephant in the room, meaningful change will require reform on the part of platform holders. Tools to disrupt this process already exist and are being used on groups like ISIS, but they're not being used on the alt-right because they try oh so hard not to get classified as terrorists. And also any functioning anti-radicalization policy would require banning a lot of conservative politicians. So there's that. But what makes our story better than theirs is that the fight for social and economic justice, though it is long and difficult and frustrating, when it works, it fulfills the promise the right can't keep. It materially makes people's lives better. I am not prone to sentimentality or to giving these videos happy endings, but one thing we have that the alt-right doesn't is hope.
All right. As always, the super good video. Hang on, let me do this right. Stop sharing there and do this thing there. Boom, Tsumami. All right. Yeah, that was a good video. That was a good video. Any just anywhere, just go anywhere, wherever your head is at. Share it with the people.
Oh, now I'm being put on the spot.
Sorry.
Um,
This is what we do to people on air.
uh, yeah, I mean, I think that's a perfect summation of like how these type of people actively seek out like spaces like this, and why they do, and why it's so important to not let them become the star of the fucking circus.
Yeah, I think that's the at the same time it's like the hardest part, right? Because I don't know, it's just built into the thing, right? Like it's what
Well,
gets the
because
most
people are eager
clicks.
to grow their channels. People are eager to get more
Yes.
subscribers and views and view fucking time and like uh I'm probably the most critical about that. I know a lot of people are very understanding about that. I personally am not. I think it's fucking stupid. I think it's fucking stupid.
I think
I
I'm of
think
two
it's
minds about it. Like I feel like I obviously I get it in the sense that I have a channel and I think everybody wants their channel to grow. I also think I'm biased in the sense that my community tends to be mostly certain groups of people. So like it's easier for me to make that a priority because that happens to just be like what my community is like. And then also I didn't like my channel as much when I had certain things going on. Like I know and I joke like the WWE thing. I know like I have like the very con the, what's the word I'm looking for? Confrontational like persona, but like I don't necessarily like having antagonistic interactions on my channel. And I know like I joke about being a hard mod, but like I don't like being antagonized by people in my chat. Like I find it genuinely I find it like distracting and then people are like not paying attention to like what I'm talking about and then I feel like all the time and like enthusiasm I have for a particular topic like isn't being harnessed. Like I prepared to do this. I really wanted to talk to my audience about this, but now instead we're dealing with this fucking distraction over here in the side chat. So like I wanted to actually stream less when those things were happening. And so part of the reason I'm the way I am, where I'm like, nope, banned, not dealing with it, is like I have to be like that, or else I won't want to do this. Like I literally just like won't even want to show up. So I kind of like, you know, that's just me. So
yeah.
I kind of be like, I guess other people are not like that, you know. And it's easy for me to have my particular take if that's how I feel. Like if I don't like dealing with trolls, then it's easy for me to be like, you shouldn't deal with trolls because they're annoying as shit. Because yeah, I think they're annoying as shit. You know. So I don't know, but yeah,
I feel like
yeah. Go ahead.
I I feel like I have I don't know, sometimes I'm more quick to be like combative, and then sometimes I'm more quick to be nurturing. I guess I feel like it just depends on like what mood I'm generally in, and also how much like of that same type of bullshit I've had to deal with recently. Like with also it depends on how egregious the fucking shit that's being said is like
Sure.
there's some people that they'll dog whistle all day, but they're not gonna like take that extra step and like actually say certain things
Yeah.
versus like
Yeah.
going into Jim Bob's chat and looking at the fucking chat and the shit that they apparently feel like it's totally fine to just say out in the open in the middle of their little live stream chat. Like, yeah, there's certain shit that there's no way I'm not even really gonna address it very much as far as like bitching them out or something, but I would just, I don't know, just immediately block them. Like, you're such a fucking like piece of shit. I'm just gonna block you, and I'm
Yeah.
not even gonna
Yeah.
fucking like give you the attention and the
Yeah.
energy. It's
Like
like,
there's a difference between like the people who just like want to put a bunch of Jesus-y shit in the chat versus like the extreme bigotry. Um
yeah.
yeah, definitely. And then also like the difference between somebody who like is just annoying or just around a lot, but versus somebody who has like a big platform and you know has
And
a lot
it's
more
and
going
it's
on.
I think it's very much about the fucking like just the like level that the marginalized person that's being fucking like having to deal with that shit every day. It makes me think of this woman Brandy that was on Periscope, that she was a lesbian, and like that was there was like we didn't really have like a community, like a sub community of like the like little group that we were in. It was more just like loosely like Yeah, like I know you vote Democrat and like I know you're like part of another marginalized group. So like we're friendly and like we're gonna back each other up on certain things, but there wasn't really like any like really cohesive like friend group, I guess. But um there would still be, you know, instances where there would be something so outrageously bigoted and just disgusting like that was said or done in like a stream that had to be addressed. And like I remember her like there was a point where somebody got upset that she didn't say something about LGBTQ people being targeted in a certain person's broadcast and the things that they were saying. And like I remember her just being like, you know what, I'm just tired. Like I'm just tired. I'm just tired. And like I remember at the time I got really mad and I was like, fuck that, Brandy. Like you need to fucking like everybody needs to say something, blah 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 blah, whatever. But like after a while, like I got it. Like yeah, after when you hear so much of this fucking shit all the goddamn fucking time, there's some times when you just don't have the fucking energy to deal with this shit. And like that brings me back to like why it's important to fucking goddamn like I don't even want to say preserve these spaces as safe spaces, but just fucking goddamn like stand up. Like those of you that are allegedly allies or friends that are not marginalized yourselves or may not be targeted in that moment, you need to stand up and say something because sometimes that person is just too fucking tired to deal with it because they've just been kicked around by motherfuckers all the goddamn time. And like, sometimes you really don't have the energy to fucking deal with the shit. And like, I feel like I sort of trail off in like my own like
No,
rambling shit, like stream of consciousness
this
bullshit.
is what we wanted. This is what I wanted you to or this is what I thought you wanted to come and talk about. Yeah, so I'll say a couple things. I can't ask you to prioritize making your channel a safe space, but I also don't understand why you wouldn't want it to be. And the other thing I'll say is people do feel betrayed because I think there's I think I think race and allied issues are essential to these differences. And so, for instance, to me, a lot of the people we deal with, I'm just going to say this because this is my channel and I'll take the heat for doing so. Most of the people we talk to on the other side of these conversations are racist. I'm just going to tell you that straight up. Like there's such a overlap. There's not a lot of people who are going to debate flat earth. You gotta remember, most of the people we talk to a lot of times they're creationists, they're flat earthers, they're part of the alt-right, they're extremely conservative. A lot of times, I hate to say this, but y'all, from afar, as somebody who's not a philosophy bro, like over half the philosophy conversations they want to have with you are literally to gaslight you about if reality is real. They literally want to like, well, are you a materialist? Well, are you a physicalist? Are you a structuralist? Do you believe matters actually? Do you believe that's a fucking table in front of you? Like, I mean, come on. Who the fuck wants to, who has to have a philosophical conversation about that? Like, as a person of color, like you just know that the Venn diagrams of all these people are the same. They just are. And so the same can be true about you when you oppose them. Like when I see a conversation between a materialist and an anti-materialist, even though it's stupid as shit, I assume the anti-materialist or the anti-naturalist is a fucking racist, and the person who says that they're for naturalism or physicalism or whatever is more left-leaning. And part of the core of that is like you're supposed to be an ally. Like I just did a lot of brushing people with broad strokes, but I don't think it's that far off from the cold read most of us have early on when you're getting to know these people. And a lot of times that's what I see then. So I'm seeing you as the non-fascist argue with fascist. And so then once I see their actual bigotry come out, or like, you know, you deal with somebody who's like, I guess, a little bit more further along the problematic spectrum, and you don't deal with it correctly, there is that sense of betrayal. Like there is that sense of, holy shit, I really thought I knew how you would respond in this situation, and clearly I didn't. And that's super enhanced by, you know, if you've known the person longer, if you're a mod on their channel, if you've had interactions with them on other platforms and really thought you were friends, or you are friends or something like that. You know, it can get that sense of betrayal can get even more intense the more you feel like you know a person.
I feel like I don't really feel a sense of betrayal. I'm just like hypercritical of everybody. Every fucking buddy, everybody. I expect you to fucking say something, period. Like, I don't care who you are, how well I fucking know you. I expect you to fucking say something.
But
And
see,
like,
that matters though, right? That's not the same thing. That's like because like I think the feeling of betrayal is something I feel, and I know other people I've talked to feel, but but what you're saying is different. Like you don't necessarily feel personally betrayed like others do, but you do feel like just being a fucking decent human being means you've got some sort of obligation to like not tolerate this shit.
yeah, I mean, I guess I think it's also partially because I am like in a very weird, like, gray area personally. And Pinky, you're not a baby. Stop trying to eat the baby food. And I feel like I simultaneously am in different marginalized groups, I guess, more than one, but also I also benefit from a lot of white privilege in a lot of ways. My mother's white. My mom's not just white. My mom is pretty fucking like bougie, and like I'm well aware of the fact that like and also like I don't know, there's other privileges that I'm aware that I benefit from. And like I guess that's part of why sometimes I don't always see things as a personal betrayal or like a personal offense, more like even if it's somebody that I know, more than just like you're just a shitty ass person in general. That's how I feel. Like it's like, now that ain't got nothing to do with me personally. I just think you're just a fucking piece of shit in general, bitch. Like I don't care if you say something specifically about Romani people or this or that or fucking sex workers or like what. No, I just think you're just a shitty ass fucking person in general. I see what you really are, and it doesn't even have to be something that personally, you know, would affect me. Like I'm not a trans woman, but absolutely if I fucking like thinking about the person that I was thinking of when I think of the Gabe that I know. He's absolutely not racist. He's absolutely, oh, sex workers, blah 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 blah. But he's a little transphobic piece of shit. And that every time that he says some shit, I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, what kind of a fucking person are you? What kind of a piece of shit are you? And like he immediately just like clams up and doesn't say anything. But yeah, that's what comes into my head is it's not a personal betrayal. I'm just like, no, you're just a bad person. Like it sounds very childish, but like you are a bad person. You're a bad person. You're not a good person, sir. Like that's what I see is like you don't care about other people. You're a bigot. Like you're a bad person, dude. Even if it's not my personal group that I am a part of that's the subject of ridicule or marginalization or whatever it is, like ugh,
I think that's the struggle for so many of us, is that you don't know where a person went wrong, but a lot of times you see them as the victim of this process, but at the same time they're now at a point where they are the problem, right? And like it's tough. It's like, oh yeah, I forget you're a victim of this indoctrination, but at the same time it's your grown ass spewing this bullshit on the internet now.
Well, it's they choose to consume the media that radicalizes them. Like, once again, I'm thinking of this person that I know personally. It's not that it's not so much that he is a victim. At a certain point, like, he's choosing. I've had conversations with him about this. It's like, I left that group that we were in, that was the Periscope group. I left that group that we were in because I'm, regardless of what I'm saying to combat it or pushing back, I, at a certain point, I cannot fucking listen to that shit all the fucking time. It's sick. It literally, like, makes me, like, fucking, like, physically, like, nauseated sometimes. Like, and absolutely, the people that are listening to that shit all fucking day, every fucking day, that it is mantric. That's it. That's a very good, like, I think that's a great metaphor. The guy that made the video that we just watched is, it's so repetitive, and it basically becomes like a mantra. They're hearing this shit day in and day out. They're reading this shit. They're spending this time on these fucking websites or watching these videos, and it's like, at a certain point, it just becomes such a normalized thing for you to hear this type of, like, fucking sicko rhetoric. And, like, at that point, I feel like you then kind of cross the line between, like, victim and perpetrator, basically. Like, and that's the point where, like, it crosses over, and you start to actively really seek that shit out because you want to fucking hear that shit, and you start to spew it out yourself. And it's, I don't know. I mean, I guess it is a very fine line between somebody that is like, you are a victim, you are being indoctrinated. I feel like that's similar with religion. Like, you basically
Mm-hmm.
are a victim of that. You've been indoctrinated. You've had this shit drilled into your fucking head. You've been stripped of certain opportunities and certain things that's made you primed for that fear and that fear mongering and that bullshit to really, like, fucking, like, root in and fucking plant its seeds in your little brain. And, like,
Yeah. So something
like
I think's
what
interesting about that is he mentioned that point about how you can't like ban all their stuff or block their stuff, and or they're having a hard time politically, basically because so many right wing that would ban the rhetoric of so many right wing politicians, essentially. And I think that that's what we deal with. It's like, because there'd be right wing politicians, it'd be a lot of religious, it'd be a lot of these conservative religious pictures. And I think that's like saying the quiet part out loud, right? That's the problem. It's like they're the foundation of a lot of this rhetoric, and that's kind of like what I was getting to about these spaces. It's like, if you're going to create spaces where people can come in and argue for this shit, here's looking at you, modern day debate, right? Then like, that's who you're inviting into this space, because it's always going to be some crazy right-wing asshole that wants to be, on the side of whatever the fucking debate topic is.
And that's what ends up taking over your space, because the people that are in those groups that they target no longer want to be in those spaces anymore, because it's immediately obvious that, like, it is not a safe space anymore. It's not safe for this person to be in anymore. They're at the very least going to be fucking feeling like shit about themselves, if not, like, actually targeted offline in ways of, like, doxing and fucking harassment and shit like that. Like,
So Michael Beverly said the hard part is figuring out the age someone should really be held accountable. Is it 12? Is it 20? Where? I don't know. And I have a bit of a cop-out answer. Actually, Tsumami, what do you think? And then I'll give my cop-out answer. So I'll be a bit let down.
I guess part of me thinks it's different for everybody, but
Sure,
then
sure.
I know that one of the things that pisses me off is, like, I mean, I'm not that young. I'm 36. I'm actually going to be 37 in fucking 4 days, but um I very often am at least, like, on the younger end of, like, certain groups that I go into on the internet. And, like, most of these groups are definitely dominated by cis white fucking heterosexual dudes. Like, not just the atheism community, but fucking gaming, or fucking like engineering stuff, or like so many goddamn different things that like I'm absolutely the minority in. And I'm definitely, if there are other women or other people like me, they're usually older. They're usually at least older than 40. And like, yeah, it's really fucking irritating. People that are like fucking 20 years old, I feel like I don't want to say I give them more of a pass, but like, you're a dumbass kid. You haven't really lived life yet. Like, when I
Sure,
think about,
sure, yeah,
I certainly wasn't, like a little bigot when I was 20 years old, but like, I was definitely dumb. I definitely probably like, I was definitely pretty stupid when I was 20. And like, it's really frustrating to see people that are a hell of a lot older than I am. Like, I'm
yeah,
just like,
yeah.
how are you like 50 years old and you haven't fucking like, you haven't like learned anything yet? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
PC.
People that are older than me, I'm absolutely gonna fucking hold you accountable a lot faster than I will some fucking 20-year-old. Like,
For sure. Media literacy matters. That's for sure, PC. So my cop out answer is this, Michael. First, I do think it's a great question, and I think Tsumami's right. It depends on the person. But my thing lately is I wonder how accountable we actually are. Like the people that are, atheist or whatever the issue might be, because I think so often, okay, I borrow a lot from the LGBTQ community, particularly thinking about like gay rights, and there's an important distinction between there for me, and I feel bad about borrowing the language, but I notice that's what people tend to go to. But it's important to distinguish between, to me, a marginalization that you can't hide, like being black or being a woman, versus something like your sexual orientation, which you can be stealth about.
yeah,
And
I feel like a lot of people don't want to talk about that.
yeah, and you could, and somebody correct me if I'm getting this wrong, right? There's something brave, right, about having an identity that you can stealth and being like, nah, fuck that. Like, we gotta let it be known we're here. And I wonder how much of the issue is there's not enough of us doing that we can reasonably hold the other side accountable for treating us well. Like, to me, it's like you got to start the accountability with the people you actually have influence on, right? And I just think there's still so many of us that are afraid to be out or to let people know, that's the reason it's still hard.
You mean like
Especially,
as far as atheism or like humanism?
yeah, definitely. But also then when it comes to like actually holding people accountable, I think it's important to do it in a way that it shouldn't matter how old they are, because I think so much of it is honestly just being honest with them. I think so much of it is, it's easy for me because I used to be a Christian, and I can tell you 100% I wanted to know the truth. And the things I know now, I wanted to know. I wanted to know that in the world of people who have investigated, there's actual doubt as to the story of Jesus. That the stories in the Old Testament weren't true, that we were evolved, and that likely means we weren't created. I mean, these are things that honestly I would have been very appreciative of somebody just laying out for me very plainly. And I often just feel like so much of why people, like well-intentioned people on the other side struggle is because every time anything comes up, we him and haw and we kind of tap dance around it. And so it's like, how accountable can they really be for accepting something no one will tell them? So that's why I said I have a cop-out answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been an atheist. I've always been an atheist. I've always been an atheist since I was a kid. I fought my fucking mom about believing in and God and like having to go to church and all that shit. Literally from the time that I was a fucking like child, a very small child, and like I don't know. I don't know. I have no problem letting people know like I'm an atheist, just like I have no problem letting people know like my mom may be white, I may look a certain type of way, but I do not categorize myself as white. I'm not a Christian, I'm atheist. Y'all hoes need to fucking know that right now. Like I come into every room like, hello, just so you guys know, I am a non-white atheist, everybody. Just want everybody to fucking know that. So you know. Also, if you are a bigot or a Nazi, I'm going to punch you in the face. And trust that I will say the same motherfucking shit in Gather, in Discord, on a stream, in real motherfucking life, sitting and smoking a blunt with your ass, sitting in fucking anywhere, bitch. Trust me, I'm gonna have the same motherfucking energy regardless of where we are. And it's very annoying, I know, but that's just how it is.
So do you have? So I guess a question: do you have any perspective or thoughts as to why it's so hard for former believers?
See, like I don't know. I guess I don't. More like, don't you, Jay? You're the one that's a former believer.
Yeah, no, for me, yeah. But I guess I'm wondering if it looks different from the outside. Like if it looks different from somebody who like doesn't have that perspective, who you know what I mean, who's just like, yeah, it's way easier to have these conversations or something like just.
It's weird.
Something we don't think about.
It's weird to me when people are like, I don't know. I understand why people are like that with family. When their family is still religious and shit like that, because they don't want to get cut out of their family. I get that, but like in like dumbass like fucking like conversations on Twitter, like shit like that, or a live stream chat or stuff like that. I don't understand what like how in the fuck could you not? I don't know. I feel like there's not so many people that shy away from admitting that they're an atheist as much as people shy away from any type of conversation about religion or about the fact that they are an atheist. Like, and they don't ever want to, they will never be in our spaces. They'll never like watch our videos. I'm not even talking about like us specifically. I mean, anybody, even Dillahunty or fucking like R and Raw, or those like, they're never going to watch those kind of videos ever, but they definitely are an atheist. Like, and there's a, like, I don't know, fucking, I was watching a true crime video earlier, and it was about a pastor's wife that the suspicion was that he had murdered her, and like every fucking comment on that video was people railing about the fucking church and their hypocrisy and blah 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 blah. And I just kept thinking, it's wild how many fucking thousands of comments there are within hours of this video being posted. Granted, I know true crime gets a lot more views than like atheist or philosophy content or whatever. But like, how many of these people are in these comments like ready to pop off about fucking religion? But you'd never see fucking even half of these people in like these video sections, the comment sections, or like live streams or anything like that, or ever having like a conversation about religion like over like fucking dinner with their friends or like drinks with their friends or something, even in like a real life like scenario. It's, I don't know, it's weird.
That is definitely part of the feeling.
It makes me feel like there's like I'm like super fixated on it or something, because that's, you know, one of the things that I like to engage in like discussion about, regardless of whether it's, you know, with people online or I do that on dates, fucking first dates. Like, let me know, like, you ready to talk about geopolitics and fucking religion? Because like if not, there ain't gonna be a second date.
Right. Yeah, I think I've been that way too, and I think I bond. I only kind of jive with people who are like into it right away, and if it's like puts off putting to somebody, I'm like, yeah, it's probably not gonna work. So
I
Michael
feel like
Bell's.
at a different, sorry, I
Oh
feel like
no,
at
no,
a
go ahead.
different point in time, maybe I wouldn't be so critical of that. But in 2020 fucking four, if y'all don't think that fucking religion and Christianity in particular in this country in America, not just in America, in the Western world, isn't a serious fucking problem, and that the intersectionality of like Christianity and fascism is not something that needs to be fucking talked about in everyday conversation. Like, I don't know what to tell y'all because like things are, our democracy is in a fucking tenuous position, okay? And like part of that is because of Christianity. And like
All right, so
I
Michael
don't understand how
said.
people can't talk about it.
So Michael said, my hubby and I were together 13 years before marriage, but surprised many when we went to get married. There was no traditional wedding kiss due to not wanting to create a quote unquote yuck factor. I just want to say that that's sad. That just makes me sad. I'm just like sorry. Um, yeah, because it just shouldn't matter. Like I just think seeing people in love on their wedding day, you know, just how happy they're supposed to be. Like you just want them to just be themselves and be able to celebrate themselves. Um, I'm glad y'all did it though. You know, I'm glad you did it. And it's crazy. I've been talking in a sense, having some conversations about that, Michael, because I think that's so interesting. I think a lot of times there's that ways that we hide little parts of ourselves for other people. And sometimes we feel like that's okay. Like it's not asking too much of us or doesn't bother us, or in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. But I think it says a lot, and I think it should always be remembered that like people shouldn't really have to do that. And that goes back to that conversation about holding other people accountable, like because you know they're really not doing anything wrong. And the reason I thought that was a good to tie into Tsumami's comment, because it does feel like so much of it is again just the problems that we're facing as a result of um, Christ of fascism. And it is the thing nobody wants to talk about. And I think it's just because everybody, not everybody, but so many people have attached themselves to their Christian identity, and they've attached that to something pro-social. I'm supposed to be you're supposed to treat me like I'm the nice one, the kind one, the loving one, and the honest one because I'm a Christian. Not like I'm a bigot because I'm a Christian. PC said, I love her bluntness, no sugarcoating. That's why we trying to get Tsumami out here in the streets more, y'all.
Hey, I don't have a computer. That's not my fault. I gotta get it. I gotta have to get another computer. It's not my fault. Several years ago, I had to pry myself out of a seriously abusive relationship with somebody, and computers, like things like that. Like I've had to replace things over the last like few years, and like computer is one of the things that I have not replaced. So yeah, I don't have a fucking computer. That's why like yeah, I don't stream anything because I have no way to really like. Mm.
Yeah, so we got to get Tsumami a computer. That's the issue there. But look, this was super fun. Thank you so much for coming on my channel. I feel very, very honored and privileged. It was really great having you. We don't have enough guests, and this is certainly a very, very special guest because I know people are always excited to see you in the chat. So thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Um, if you can't like fucking clap back against Nazis, then you need to like be quiet when like other people do, and don't try to like prevent them from doing so. Don't try to criticize how they fucking choose to respond to that person, the Nazi, fucking the bigot, whatever. You don't get to police that. You don't get to decide how that person responds or whether their response is appropriate. Just shh. If you can't do it yourself, just be quiet when somebody else does. That's my final thought.
Oh, that was very much a very specific mic drop. Yeah, stay out of my way. I love it. Look, we're going to get out of here on that, y'all. Y'all know we being gathered hanging out. There are links in the description. Subscribe to Tsumami's channel. I love y'all. We'll see you